Sometimes the truth is stranger than fiction, and today we're going to look at 3 stories that demonstrate that. But before we get into today's stories, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you come to the right channel because that's all we do, and we upload 2 or 3 times every week. So if that's of interest to you, please replace all of the like button's Windex with olive oil. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. All right, let's get into today's stories. In January of 2015, a 27-year-old Texas man named George Pickering III suffered a massive stroke. He was immediately admitted to a hospital where he was put on life support, and then doctors delivered some bad news to his family. It would turn out George was brain dead, and they advised the family that realistically they should consider pulling George off of life support because it wasn't going to do him any good. George's family was totally devastated by this news. In fact, George's father was so upset he just left the hospital altogether. And so in his father's absence, George's mother and brother wound up talking to doctors and saying that, yes, we are prepared to pull George off of life support. After they consented to have this done, they put George on an organ donor list and then began making funeral plans. When George's father came back to the hospital later that day and found out his family had consented to have George pulled from life support, he was furious. He did not believe his son was just totally brain dead and there was no hope. He felt like they should at least try to give him a little bit more time to potentially give them a signal that he was okay. But George's mother and brother told George's father that they had spoken to the doctors and there was just no hope. There was no reason to delay this process. It was time. But George's father was totally not having it. He stormed out of the room and he found the doctors and he demanded they keep his son on life support just a little bit longer. But the doctors told him there really is no reason to do that. And in fact, all you're doing is jeopardizing the people that need his organs, that are waiting for this organ transplant. And so really what we need to do is actually expedite taking him off of life support because that's the best thing to do right now. George's father was so upset, totally distraught. He ran back to his son's room. He laid over his son and he just held his hands and stared at him and just prayed that his son would give him some sign that he was actually not brain dead, but his son didn't. And before long, the doctors began filtering into the room to begin the procedure of removing his son from life support. And when they came in the room, George's father kind of snapped. He ran out of the room. He ran out of the hospital. He went out to his car and he got his gun and then ran back into the hospital, back into his son's room and aimed the gun at the doctors and ordered them to stop what they were doing and leave the room immediately. And so the doctors had not actually begun removing George from life support. So he's still on life support. And so once the doctors and everyone left the room, George's father walked over, he locked the door, and then for the next several hours, he just kept his gun aimed at the door as he laid over his son and just kept looking down in hopes that his son would give him some sign that he was not brain dead. And so finally, when the SWAT team arrived and was stacking up outside the door in the hallway, they began yelling into the room for George's father to put the gun down and let them come in. And George's father the whole time is just looking down at his son, hoping and praying that his son is just going to do something. And right as the SWAT team kicks in the door and comes into the room, George's father had reached down and grabbed his son's hand, and his son squeezed his hand back. And as soon as his father felt that, he dropped the gun and he surrendered peacefully to the SWAT team. And then the SWAT team put George's father on the ground. And as he's being detained, George's father is yelling for the doctors to come in the room. My son is okay. And sure enough, when the doctors came in the room, George was okay. He was moving his hand, his eyes were open, he was making good eye contact, and before long, he made a totally full recovery. He would later be told that had his father not stepped in when he did and bought him those extra few hours on life support, George would have died. As for George's father, he was ultimately sentenced to 10 months in prison for his aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, but he and the rest of his family think what he did was certainly worth going to prison for. In 1959, Ronald McNair was a very gifted 9-year-old African-American boy living in South Carolina. While he was good at virtually everything he tried, from music to athletics to schoolwork, the only thing that ever really grabbed his attention was outer space. And so as a 9-year-old child, he made the decision that one day he was going to become an astronaut. but he had no idea how to become an astronaut. And so he decided the first thing he would do would be to go to his library and take out some books on NASA, the very famous organization that sends American astronauts to space. However, there was an issue with his plan. This library only served white patrons. It was a segregated library. Ronald knew this, but he figured, you know what? I'm a polite kid. I can get in there and get out before anybody notices me. But as soon as he walked into that library, everybody in there, who were all white, just stared at Ronald. Ronald could feel it, but he just kept his head down and he walked through the library. He got to the science section. He grabbed a couple books he wanted, and then he walked back to the counter and he put them up. And he very politely asked the librarian, who was also white, if he could check these books out. And this librarian looks at him and says, "Young man, you better get out of here before I call the police." And Ronald, at this point, looks up at the librarian and thinks for a second, and then just hops up onto her counter and sits there and says, "Okay, I'll wait for the police." The librarian was totally outraged and would call the police and would call Ronald's mother. And before long, the police did show up, and it was two white guys. They come inside, and this librarian runs over to them, and she's talking to them, and she's pointing back over at Ronald, gesticulating that very clearly Ronald is the issue. That's why you've been called here. And the officers would be just totally annoyed by this librarian. And they would say to her, "Why don't you just let the kid take the books out?" And the librarian was totally offended at this and began defending her decision to call the police instead of letting him take the books out. And as she's defending herself, Ronald's mother comes running into the library. She runs over to her son to make sure he's okay. And then she looks up at the police officers and this librarian to try to figure out what's going on. And at this point, the police officers are just totally over it. And they turn to the librarian and they say, "You know what? You really ought to let him take the books out." And then the officers just turned around and left. The librarian was not about to just let him take the books. She was still very upset. And so she storms over to Ronald's mother and she says to her, "You shouldn't let your son come in here." And at this, Ronald's mother is looking at this librarian who's totally upset, and she looks down at her son who's got his head down, and then she notices the few books on the counter about space. And she was aware of Ronald's love for outer space, and she put together what had happened. And after thinking about it for a moment, she looks up at this librarian and she just says, "Well, since he's here already, can he take out those books? He'll take good care of them." The librarian is still totally furious, but knows this is a losing fight. And so very reluctantly, with a scowl on her face, she grabs the books and she jams them into Ronald's arms. And Ronald's mother nudges Ronald and says, "What do you say?" And Ronald, while holding all of his new books about NASA and space, looks up at the librarian and smiles and says, "Thank you, ma'am." And then he and his mom turn around and they leave. Ronald would go on to earn his PhD in physics from MIT, one of the most prestigious universities in the world. And after graduation, he was picked up by NASA to become an astronaut. And in 1984, Ronald went into outer space. He was actually the second African American to ever go into outer space. And while he was in orbit, apparently he played his saxophone for his crew. And then in 1986, Ronald was chosen again to go on another mission to outer space. But tragically, 73 seconds after takeoff, their space shuttle, the Challenger, exploded, killing Ronald and the 6 other astronauts on board. Following his death, the library in South Carolina that had tried to turn Ronald away for his skin color renamed themselves the Ronald McNair Life History Center. The United States formally entered World War II in December of 1941, following the surprise attack on Pearl Harbor in Hawaii by the Japanese. Roughly 6 months later, a 21-year-old Alabama native named Henry Irwin joined the Army Reserve. After nearly 2 years of additional military training, Henry was made into a radio operator and was assigned to a B-29 bomber. A B-29 bomber is this huge aircraft whose sole purpose is to drop bombs. And so in February of 1945, Henry and his B-29 bomber unit were sent to the Pacific to do just that, drop bombs on the Japanese. 2 months after arriving, Henry's B-29 was tasked with being the lead bomber in a group attack on a Japanese chemical facility located about 125 miles north of Tokyo. Aside from just operating his radio inside of the B-29, occasionally Henry's job was to organize the other planes in the attack when their B-29 was the lead attacker. And so the way he would do this was by dropping a series of smoke bombs out of his plane, and then once they touched the ground and all the smoke was coming up, he would hop on his radio and communicate with the other pilots in his sortie and tell them to organize themselves off of this visual reference point on the ground. ground. He would basically have them fly to certain positions relative to the smoke cloud. And so once all the pilots had been organized into proper formation, they would continue to their target and commence their bombing raid. For this mission, Henry was in his typical position right behind the front turret gun towards the front of the plane. When his pilot told him to start dropping smoke bombs, Henry did as he was told. And so he pulled the lever, which opened up a chute on the bottom of the plane, and all these smoke bombs began tumbling out of it. Now, as soon as he pulled that lever, all of the smoke bombs that were in that particular chute were ignited. They were on a timed fuse. And so they would tumble out of the plane, and then before hitting the ground, they would ignite, and then smoke would start billowing out of them. But for some reason, after he pulled that lever, a couple of the smoke bombs fell out of the chute, but one of them kind of got turned around, and as it tumbled down, it kind of caught itself on the lip and bounced back up into the plane, and it struck Henry square in the face, shattering his nose, and then it ignited and literally lit Henry's face on fire, which instantly blinded him. Smoke bombs are not considered lethal devices because they do not explode the way typical bombs do. However, make no mistake about it, you would not want to be near a military-grade smoke bomb when it went off. In order for it to emit that very thick and long-lasting smoke that it does, the smoke bomb ignites a chemical fire within itself that burns extremely hot. And so when the smoke bomb came back inside the plane and ignited right in front of Henry, those chemicals landed on his face. And so that's why he caught on fire. And if that wasn't bad enough, the smoke bomb also filled the plane completely with smoke, making it impossible for the pilots to see anything. Despite his burning, shattered face, all Henry could think about was if he didn't get this smoke bomb off the plane in the next few seconds, they were all going to crash and die. So instead of trying to put out his burning face, Henry began feeling around on the ground for the smoke bomb, which again is basically like a fireball. And when he found it, he pulled it into his chest, trying to smother it as best as he could. And while his body completely engulfed in flames, Henry began low crawling his way towards the front of the plane, where he knew just by touch there was going to be a window. And so as he agonizingly crawled, he's on fire. He finally gets to this window. He can feel it above him, and he manages to lift the smoke bomb up and throws it out the window. And then afterwards, he collapses on the ground and he passes out completely on fire, fully expecting to die. A few seconds later, the smoke inside of the plane cleared because now the smoke bomb was gone. And the pilot, who had put the plane on autopilot but did have to drop significantly in altitude because they were starting to stall, finally could see again and saw they were about 300 feet from hitting the water. And so he was able to pull back and get them out of their dive, and he narrowly escaped crashing into the water, and he turned around and began flying back to base. On this return trip, the crew, who were unhurt, began assessing the damage, and they saw Henry on fire on the side of the plane. And so they rushed over and they put him out with a fire extinguisher, expecting him to be dead. But to their shock and horror, he was still alive. And so they gave him morphine for his pain and expected him to die any moment. But Henry didn't die. Instead, he was very cheerful on the flight all the way back to base. And he would ask each of his crew members if they were okay. And they would all say, yeah, I'm just fine. It's really you who we're concerned about here. When the pilot finally landed back at base, Henry's body had stiffened up so dramatically from being on fire that the doctors couldn't actually get him out of the plane's side door. And so they had to dismantle the side of the plane to get Henry out. And so the doctors fully expected Henry was going to die basically any moment from his horrible wounds. But since he hadn't yet, they did everything they could to try to save him. They put him through dozens of surgeries, including one where they would try to remove the chemical flecks from the smoke bomb that had embedded in his eyes. And since these chemicals combusted as soon as they made contact with oxygen, every time they pulled out one of these flecks, it would burst into flames and very painfully burn Henry's eyes a little bit more. While Henry was undergoing all these surgeries, the rest of his B-29 crew immediately went to their commanding officer and said, you have to put Henry in for the Medal of Honor. The Medal of Honor is the highest award you can achieve in the US military. After the commanding officer heard the story of what Henry had done, he agreed, and in record time, he got the paperwork processed and got Henry approved for this award. But there were no actual physical medals of honor on the island to actually present to Henry. And the officers and the rest of his crew were worried Henry would die before the actual medal was shipped out to the island to be given to him. And so the only Medal of Honor that was on this island was inside of a museum behind a glass case. And so one of the officers in Henry's crew went into the museum, shattered the case, took the display Medal of Honor, and rushed to Henry's bedside and put it around his neck. And then after that, that, somehow, Henry just didn't die. After dozens and dozens of surgeries, Henry actually regained sight in one of his eyes and regained the use of most of his body. Henry would later be asked in an interview what it was like to do this very heroic thing that he did. And he would say, well, I only moved the bomb 13 feet, but 13 feet feels like 13 miles when you're on fire. Henry would go on to be honorably discharged from the military, and he would spend the next 37 years working closely with other burn victims, trying to keep them positive and optimistic about their recovery. He would also go on to have 4 children, one of which became an Alabama state senator. In 2002, Henry died of natural causes at the age of 80. So that's going to do it, guys. If you found the secret in today's episode, let us know in the comments section what it is and where you found it. So give us the timestamp. And if you're the first to do that, we'll pin you at the top of the comment section. If you got something out of today's episode and you haven't done this already, please replace all of the like buttons Windex with olive oil. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly 2 or 3 video uploads. We are now selling merchandise like flannels, hats, mugs, all sorts of stuff. And so if you want official Mr. Ballin merch, go to shopmrballin.com. Also, please follow our shop's Instagram page. The username is shopmrballin, where you can find all of our upcoming deals and promotions. If you want to get in touch with me, you can direct message me on Instagram or on Twitter. My username for both platforms is the same. It's johnballin416. I also have a ton of content over on TikTok, where my username is Mr. Ballin. We also have a second YouTube channel called Mr. Ballin Shorts, where we post random short videos and lost episodes. If you have a story suggestion, please submit it to our subreddit just called Mr. Ballin. It's linked in the description below. So whether I see you on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Reddit, YouTube, or some combination, just know that I really appreciate your support. And until next time, that's going to do it. See ya.
In our number 10 spot, we have Angel's Landing. In the early 2000s, there was a cult by the name of Angel's Landing, which was also the name of the site the cult would meet in Wichita, Kansas. Lou Castro, also known as Daniel Perez, was the leader of this cult, and his followers were convinced that he was an angel. He had also convinced his followers that he was a seer, aka a fortune teller or a psychic, and he would perform ceremonies where he would predict their future and know when they were going to die. Of course, it's because he himself was going to kill them, but before doing so, he took out life insurance policies on them and then cashed in that money for luxury vehicles and items. Wow. The death prediction would have been a red flag to me, but clearly these people were in a very vulnerable state to believe that. Thankfully, Lou was found guilty for 28 crimes and has been sentenced to life in prison. Hallelujah. In our number 9 spot, we have the Great White Brotherhood. This is a known Australian cult that was founded by Anne Hamilton Byrne. In the 1960s, Anne was a yoga teacher who actually believed herself to be Jesus Christ. She teamed up with parapsychologist Raynor Johnson to form the cult, and over a few years, Anne adopted 28 young ones by receiving them as gifts from members, as well as by falsifying papers to convince others to give their children up for adoption. The goal? To create a master race that would survive the apocalypse that was believed to be coming. She would tell these humans that she was Jesus Christ, and if they went against any of her wishes, they would be beaten, starved, or dosed with an illicit drug. The cult was eventually raided and everyone was removed, and Anne was charged. But get this, she was only charged for falsifying birth certificates. That's it. She died actually from dementia in 2019 at 98, but never received any further punishment. Wow. In our number 8 spot, we have the Children of God. Also known as Teens for Christ, it was founded in 1968 by preacher David Berg in California. It attracted the hippies of the day, as this cult preached the words of Jesus and the Bible, but with more of an open twist to the free love movement of the time. There were horrible ritual acts, such as the one that was called flirty fishing, where women would perform acts of giving themselves in different inappropriate ways to get men into the cult. Mainly everyone in the cult didn't work, and there were about 15,000 members around the world. Allegedly, actors Joaquin Phoenix and Rose McGowan grew up in Children of God communes. Pretty wild. In our number 2 spot, we have the Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints Church. This is a church that honestly screams the unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt. Anyone? Such a good show. I bet the writers of the show got their inspiration from this cult. So this church cult was run by a man named Warren Jeffs, and he had a number of wives within the church. It was a polygamous Mormon church. Rituals would include your regular church worship with the twist of do what I say and give yourself to me or you will be damned to hell. Women weren't allowed to cut their hair and were made to wear prairie dresses, and also Warren decides who marries who. And of course, he marries most of the women. Warren Jeffs was eventually sentenced to jail for a number of accounts, but apparently some still believe him to be a prophet. Coming up in our number 1 spot, we have whatever cult Angelina Jolie once spoke about. Okay, so there is a Hollywood cult that Angelina Jolie was once caught on camera speaking about to her friends in 1999. The video surfaced online in 2006. The name of the cult was never mentioned, but the details of one of the rituals that is performed is pretty terrifying. We can imagine that it's some Hollywood cult. I'm sure there's a bunch. As she mentions that it's a sort of celeb initiation that is often misunderstood as a form of sadism and masochism combined. Apparently, Angelina talks about her experience and how during the ritual, the initiated people are tied up and tortured, and acts of inappropriate touching are performed, if you catch my drift. She then talks about how she got a tattoo after the ritual and how she had to kill a snake as a sacrifice. Anyways, I wish I knew what cult this was, but I have no idea, so we're going to continue to call it the cult that Angelina Jolie once spoke about. In our number 10 spot, we have the Ant Hill Kids. In 1977, a Canadian man named Roch Theranault, I might be pronouncing it wrong, it's kind of a hard name to pronounce, created a doomsday cult that was called the Ant Hill Kids. Their beliefs were based on the Seventh-day Adventist Church, a church that Therault was personally removed from before creating his own cult. He began to assemble his followers on the premise that the world would end in February of 1979. The cult resided in Burnt River, Ontario. Roch is most known for performing all kinds of surgeries on his followers, including amputations and castrations. Oh my lord. He even fathered 26 people with multiple wives within this cult. Roch was thankfully arrested in 1989, and he met his own doomsday end in prison by another inmate in 2011. In our number 8 spot, we have the Brethren. Still around today, and possibly a cult that would love to be adopted worldwide, I'm sure. This is a cult that was founded by Jimmy T. Richards in 1971. This group is considered radical as they believe that the only way to prepare for the end of the world is to purify yourself by giving up all modern conveniences and conflicts. The members are forbidden from celebrating. Man, that sucks and hurts my soul. I feel like I celebrate all the time. Heck, I celebrated when I woke up earlier and pushed myself to stay up. That's cause for celebration. They are expected to make anything they need and ignore all modern social conventions. Imagine having to make everything you need in life. No, I can't imagine this. I don't even know how to use a hammer properly, so I would probably be kicked out of this one. In our number 7 spot, we have the Plymouth Brethren. This is a doomsday cult that was created in 1831 in Dublin, Ireland, that was created by John Darby, a clergyman. Eventually, the group made its way to the United States, where it had roughly 50 1,000 followers. They studied the Bible, but the cult had some very interesting rules and beliefs as well. Members weren't allowed to go to the theater, probably because of fear of indoctrination of non-Bible believing ideas. But also, for example, all pets needed to be put down as they were considered a distraction to God. Even the members had to attend service 5 times on Sundays. So basically, they had no Sunday. The cult is most likely still strong today because John Darby never actually put an end date down for the doomsday. He just said it would happen at the end of the church age. Smart. Then you could die before it happens, and you'll never know if you were right, and you also never have to take the blame if it doesn't because you never said when. In our number 6 spot, we have the Laodicean Remnant Adventist Church. This cult is truly very terrifying, so I'm so happy that it has been raided and closed down. I mean, all cults are terrifying, but most of these cults are joined by people that have the choice to be a part of them. This cult gained its following through force. 79 people were put into forced labor, and they were promised that they would achieve salvation before the world ended. They were forced to sleep in tents and use dangerous machinery. And they were also forced to sleep near containers of dangerous chemicals. You would think that perhaps their food would be covered by this cult, but it was not. The brainwashing ended up running so deep that the people didn't even want to leave when the cult was raided in 2019. I'm so glad that this cult will not be trying to take over the world anytime soon. Coming up in our number 5 spot, we have Heaven's Gate. Not a cult that necessarily wanted to take over the world in its prime, but one where the leaders definitely thought that they were special enough that a Bible verse was referring to them. Arguably not as threatening, however, they managed to convince a group of people to take their own lives, so perhaps they truly were. Marshall Applewhite and wife Bonnie Nettles apparently read the book of Revelation and saw a reference in chapter 11, verse 3 to 2 witnesses to the end times, and they believed themselves to be those 2 witnesses. They at one point believed that a UFO would transfer them to a higher state of being, and when that didn't happen, they moved on and began believing that if they took their own life, then their souls would be transferred to a spaceship following the Hale-Bopp comet. What's eerie to me about this cult is that someone has kept their initial website active for all of these years. The creators have long gone, so why? Perhaps someone somewhere still believes in these ideas and hopes others will too. In our number 3 spot, we have Shincheonji. This is an active cult still today that was founded in 1984 by Lee Man-hee. Known as the Shincheonji Church of Jesus, this cult is devoted to the thought that only through Lin Man-hee is Jesus Christ reanimated. Through him, followers believe that they can escape damnation. This is one of the largest doomsday cults in South Korea, and so many say is heavily radicalized. For example, they preach that getting sick is a sin as it distracts the person from being able to preach the word of God. In 2020, a practicing woman took her own life when she got sick with the coronavirus. This cult continues to try to spread its word to the world, and they definitely would want to take over if the opportunity presented itself. In our number 2 spot, we have the Church of Almighty God, aka Eastern Lighting. This is a pretty serious doomsday cult that is said to be still active today. I was honestly quite terrified while reading some of the reports that have been filed on this cult that I can't even believe it hasn't been shut down yet. This is a cult that was based off of a woman claiming that she was the reincarnation of Jesus Christ. She is pretty obscure and most members have no idea who she is. Limited people have contact with her. The group is known for its violent acts against people of all ages. On October 14th, 2014, a woman was heavily beaten to death after turning down the cult members who were trying to recruit her. Honestly, this sounds more like a mob to me, but would love to know your thoughts in the comment section below. In our number 1 spot, we have the Supreme Truth. Supreme Truth is a cult that started in Japan in the 80s that was strong for 2 reasons. 1, people believed that its creator, Shoko Ashara, was not only the reincarnation of Jesus Christ, but also of Buddha. We'll get back to that one. And 2, because he had his followers believe that after World War III ended, humanity would come to an end. A thought that began to slowly become less convincing as World War III never came about, and humanity wasn't seemingly coming to an end. But the fact that people not only thought he was the reincarnation of Jesus and Buddha has to make you think, what the heck were they drinking? That is so clearly not a true story. Nonetheless, people believed him so heavily that they even paid money for his bath water, his hair, and one person even wanted his blood. Eventually, this cult turned quite violent, committing a lot of crimes in Japan, and after being captured, changed its name a few times. Rumor has it that it's still active and gaining traction. Yikes. Well, that's terrifying. I think I may go into my Disney princess bubble for the rest of the day, as the idea of these cults still in power and trying to influence the people of the world is just the most scary. Excuse me as I go blast the Tarzan soundtrack. Phil Collins always soothes the soul.
Starting off this list, we have the Movement for the Restoration of the Ten Commandments of God. This cult with the catchiest name was founded in Uganda by 4 ex-Roman Catholic priests, 2 ex-nuns, and 1 former sex worker, and it was initially said to really emphasize the Ten Commandments. Apparently, these leaders thought that the Roman Catholic Church had really abandoned the Ten Commandments, and they wanted to bring back some rules. They couldn't just focus on these rules, however, they also had some doomsday prophecies as well, like all good cults. They claimed that the apocalypse would come on December 31st, 1999, and in anticipation of this, a bunch of the members sold all of their possessions, so of course they were pretty irritated when the world in fact did not end. The leaders scrambled and instead altered their predictions, saying that the Virgin Mary would instead come on March 17th, 2000, and that she would bring them all to heaven. The followers continued to believe this, and on March 16th, they had a huge feast. The following day, on March 17th, police arrived to where the cult resided and found that an explosion and fire had killed hundreds of members of the group. At first, they thought that this could have been a voluntary event, but soon they saw the signs that pointed to this being a mass killing. The leaders likely took the lives of the followers because they could not pay them back, and they also knew that their quote-unquote prophecies were false. At first, it was thought that the leaders were among those whose bodies were found, but that isn't quite the case. No one is exactly sure if they ended up losing their lives or if instead they fled the country, which many people believe. At this point, there's still a warrant out for their arrest, so while the authorities have never officially confirmed that they are on the run, it is truly the most likely scenario. In our number 7 spot today, we have Adolfo de Jesus Constanzo. Adolfo was at one point a dealer and also the leader of a horrifying cult that was nicknamed by the media the Narco-Satanists. Adolfo's followers believed that he had magical abilities, but in the worst way possible. He required his followers to kidnap young men who Adolfo would practice horrible, sadistic rituals on and ultimately take their lives in order to replenish his magic. It's an absolutely horrific story, and this carried on for years until the disappearance of Mark Kilroy. Mark was a Texas college student who was in Mexico for some fun over spring break in 1989, but sadly during this trip, he was taken by the cult's followers. Mark's friends quickly noticed his disappearance and began searching for him. This led to a border-crossing manhunt, and authorities quickly revealed what had been going on, but Adolfo had already fled. He and 4 of his followers fled to Mexico City, and this is how he was finally caught. Police were called to the apartment they were staying at as a result of a totally unrelated dispute, but because Adolfo knew they were looking for him, he just assumed that they were there for him, and he opened fire with a machine gun. Not wanting to go to prison, he then handed the weapon over to one of his followers and asked him to open fire on himself, and by the time police were able to reach the apartment, he was already dead. In the end, 14 cult members were charged for the crimes relating to everything that went on. In our number 4 spot today, we have Jim Jones. Jim is certainly one of the most well-known people on this list for all of the wrong reasons. He is the man who claimed that he was the reincarnation of Jesus, Buddha, and Gandhi, and he founded the cult which was originally called Wings of Deliverance, but he later changed the name to the People's Temple Full Gospel Church. After an expose in the New West magazine about the things going on in this cult, Jim felt the need to move him and his followers into hiding. In order to flee the media scrutiny in the United States, Jim leased land in Guyana and ended up moving them all there. From here, there were claims of horrible things and human rights violations, which led to another investigation. People found out that some of the supposed members of this cult were actually being held against their will. In the end, with all of this going on, Jim managed to convince his followers to all take their lives in one massive, horrible event, and this day has gone on to become known as the Jonestown Massacre. A total of 918 people died that day, including Jim himself. In our number 3 spot today, we have the True Russian Orthodox Church, also known as Heavenly Jerusalem. This cult was an offshoot of the Russian Orthodox Church founded by Peter Kuznetsov. Back in 2007, there were about 30 members of this group that all went into hiding in a Russian cave where Peter told them that they had to wait until the world ended in 2008. This one is a little different from the others on this list because while Peter put these members into the cave, he didn't go in there with them. After 2 members died in the cave, one passed from cancer and the other from starvation, some of the members ended up deciding to leave. Like, thank goodness. They ended up leaving because they were frightened of the toxic fumes that could come from the corpses. The other members in the cave only left after the roof of the cave started to collapse in 2008. In May of that year, after the bodies of those who had passed were removed by authorities, the cave was then blown up. In our number 2 spot today, we have Daniel Perez. Daniel Perez might be better known by his alias Lou Castro, but whatever you want to call him, he led a cult that was located on a 20-acre property in a rural area just north of Wichita. He convinced his followers that he had magical powers, and he told them all that he was a centuries-old angel who needed to commit some horrific crimes in order to stay alive. These crimes would have certainly been more than enough to just throw him on this list, but he of course couldn't just stop at committing one type of crime. He had to make sure he really stole the show on being the worst. Basically, he had this clever idea to use his followers' life insurance policies in order to live a lavish lifestyle, like as if no one would think that's weird or suspicious. While some of these life insurance policies were collected through regular means, of course that kind of greed only leads to evil things, which of course means that he ended up taking one of his followers' lives so that he could collect the cash. It is thought that he also contributed to the deaths of some of the other people's life insurance policies he cashed in on, but unfortunately there was never any evidence that would be able to substantiate that claim. In 2010, Castro moved from Kansas to Tennessee and adopted a new identity, but he was soon arrested by the FBI for aggravated identity theft and fraudulent use of a social security card number. While serving time for this crime, it was discovered what his real name was, as well as the charges that had been placed against that former identity. Thankfully, in February of 2015, he was convicted on all counts and received a sentence of 80 years in jail.
Starting off at number 10, we have Winona Ryder in the Rainbow Family Commune of Living. If you're a fan of all the iconic 80s movies and Johnny Depp's Wino Forever tattoo, then you should know the name Winona Ryder very, very well. But what you may not know is that Ryder was raised in the Rainbow Family Commune of Living for most of her life. Ryder's family joined the commune when she was just 7 years old and lived a life solely on the land. No TV, no electricity whatsoever. So how on earth did Winona become so excited about acting? Well, it was actually reading that got her interested in the profession, and when her family moved out of the commune a few years later, she began auditioning. Thankfully, they left the cult life behind before it went really south, but Winona still describes her parents as the 60s hippie type. When she started going to regular school, however, she was still considered an outcast and suffered various types of verbal and physical bullying. But there's a reason we know Winona's name, because she's awesome and she turned whatever weirdness people thought she had into a prolific film and TV career. Go Winona. Number 9, The Organite Society with Jaden Smith. This next one has drawn in the likes of Jaden Smith and Kylie Jenner. If you're a follower of these two celebs, then you may have seen them holding strange pyramid objects that look like the product of one of those satisfying TikTok resin videos. Well, that's not entirely wrong. These objects are called organites and are the signature object of those in the Organite Society. What are they? They are pyramids of organite, which is a man-made crystal said to be able to realign and heal our imbalanced energies. According to the official website, an organite is made from resin, metals, and quartz, which sounds like the perfect craft for all those TikTok resin hobbyists out there. The ideology behind the Organite Society stems from a banned Austrian psychiatrist named Dr. Wilhelm Reich.
What the fuck is that?
He was expelled from the
And then like a
International
cheap
Psychoanalytical
garbage of crap.
Association after Freud found significant red flags in his practice and was like, nah, not this guy, get out. After escaping World War II Germany and coming to America, Reich brought his research with him Unfortunately, I don't know. Making human-sized boxes out of organic and inorganic material. He claimed that if people laid on top of the boxes, the organ would reorganize their cosmic energies, even allegedly healing those with cancer. He was eventually imprisoned
Do
for
you mean
spreading
that
medical
inside would be
disinformation
screwed
and
up like a
ironically
goddamn meat
died of
pile?
heart failure. But even after his death, organites still live on and have obviously caught some significant attention. A part of me wonders whether Jaden and Kylie knew what they were joining or if this was just something fun to make at parties. Coming in at number 8, we have David and Patricia Arquette. Though the entire Arquette family are actors, you may recognize the name David and Patricia Arquette for the shows like Medium and, I don't know, Scream. Alongside their interest in acting, the family also had a difficult upbringing linked to the Saboud cult. Patricia was only 4 when they moved into the commune, and her brother David was in fact born there. But what is the Saboud movement? Well, like many others, it's a cult built around a religious idea of finding the inner self and began in
Why I
Indonesia
feel like
in the
I don't believe this
1920s.
shit.
Centered around a practice called Latian, members met around once or twice, men separated from women, to meditate and accept the power of God through movement. Wailing? Whatever they felt like. Basically sounds like they just did what they felt they needed to or what they felt God told them to do. The Arquettes lived in a communal space with no washroom or electricity or running water in order to be brought closer to nature. The commune eventually became so poor that the government intervened and dropped off food for them. But apparently there was fun to be had at the commune because very often the Arquettes would do performances. After a few years, though, the family eventually moved back to Chicago after no longer being able to sustain themselves. We all know breathing is good for you. We need it. We literally can't survive without it. But some seem to think that's all we need to survive. Coming in at number 7, we have Michelle Pfeiffer and the Breatharian cult. A Breatharian believes that through strict meditation, they can reach a higher conscious state that allows them to be able to survive on air and sunlight alone. No food, nothing else. When Michelle was a young actress in Hollywood, she somehow got involved with a group of Breatharians. I also love the name, it's so literal. Like, cut straight to the point. We're about breathing air. Breatharians. Apparently, they were very controlling and kept her on a strict vegetarian diet that no one could sustain. Though she never lived with them, she visited constantly due to pressure she received. This became such a financial burden on her because she had to pay every time she was there, which was a lot. She was quite literally a starving artist. Her ex-husband, Peter Horton, helped her get out of it due to a movie he was working on at the time that dealt with followers of the Unification Church. After doing more research, Michelle finally realized that she was in a cult and got out. Thank goodness she did, because this cult also had some deadly consequences. Some people have even starved themselves to death by their own hand. Most famously was Verity Lynn, who while attempting a 21-day breatharian program, died of hypothermia and malnutrition brought on by self-neglect. Coming in at number 6, we have Val Kilmer and the Christian Science Group. Here is another cult that has its followers believing in the power of prayer to cure all. We may not have seen much of Val Kilmer lately, unless you've been rewatching the 1995 Batman Forever or the Doors movie, but that's because we almost lost him. In 2014, Kilmer finally went to the doctor due to a massive lump in his throat and was diagnosed with throat cancer. Now, the Christian Science organization reneged this and said it was more of an idea of cancer rather than actual cancer. The group convinced him that he must instead relocate and dedicate himself to prayer so that his fear no longer manifested externally. Thankfully, his kids and family were like, "No, Dad, please, no, don't do that. That's not going to work. That's not a thing," and thankfully convinced him to get the surgery he needed to survive. But even still, Kilmer attributes his healing to prayer and not, the doctors that helped him. Coming in at number 5, we have the surprising discovery of Glenn Close and the MRA. In 2014, the OG Cruella de Vil star revealed her family's experience with the moral rearmament cult. The MRA was founded by evangelist leader Reverend Frank Buckman in 1938 under the idea that to change the world, you have to change the individual. Though that's not entirely a wrong way to look at global transformation, how he went about it was pretty, cultish? From age 7 to age 22, Glenn and her siblings were sent to live at the group headquarters in Switzerland. They indeed had a group mentality where everyone had to say and do all the same things. According to Close, if you even had desires to do otherwise, you were made to feel insanely guilty about it. When she finally broke away from the group, she wrote a furious letter to her father for what he had done by sending them to the group. She said, as a result of her upbringing that she was terrified because she couldn't trust any of her own instincts, having entirely been defined by falsehoods while she was raised. Thankfully, she was able to find her way out of there, walk straight into acting school, therapy, and has now become the absolute icon she is today. Coming in at number 4, imagine your mom finally meets someone and you move in with him right away. Sounds like a suspicious setup. Am I right? This is an evil stepfather story. From age 7, famous rapper Angel Hayes was introduced to the Greater Apostolic Faith Group by her mother. According to Hayes, all the people within the community lived 10 minutes apart and were forbidden to speak to anyone else outside of it. Couldn't listen to music, wear jewelry, and even eat certain things. It continued to get darker and darker, and sadly, Hayes experienced some of the worst kinds of assault. Thankfully, Angel and her family escaped and she was out of there by age 10 and has built a phenomenal music career since then, which she has used to tell her story and reach out to those who need to hear the same. Her music is filled with passion and revenge for all those who wronged her inside this prolific cult. Her song, Cleaning Out My Closet, is the best example of how Angel has taken her story and used it to create bad music people need to hear. Coming in at number 2, we have Scientology. This next one is pretty controversial, as many debate whether it is a new form of religion or a business or a cult or all three. If you guess Scientology, then you are correct, and I almost don't even need to tell you who are our stars involved with it. We got Tom Cruise, we got Elizabeth Moss, we got Kirstie Alley, and John Travolta, and actually many more. One of the reasons people think this religion is so far-fetched was that it was found by an American science fiction writer, Ron L. Hubbard, in 1955. It was initially introduced as a kind of therapy called Dianetics, which sought to erase the content of the active mind so the soul could be more free. But Hubbard came to detest it, as many psychologists denounced it. He was like, oh, never mind, I hate it. Whatever. Scientologists mainly focus on the evolution of the spirit on Earth and something called the Thetan, which they believe is an extraterrestrial creature who created all things. Thetans are trapped within us and have lived multiple human lives. The goal of the Scientologists is to become more aware of the Thetan within them so that they can achieve abilities they never thought possible, I think. Guys, honestly, I'm not gonna lie, Scientology is pretty confusing, to say the least. But for some reason, this science and faith-based religion has swept Hollywood, and its followers are devout, to say the least. But those who have left often have some strange things to say. One ex-member named Leah Remini says that any materials not written by a Scientologist are taught to be lies set on tearing the religion down. Anyone who speaks out against the church is considered an enemy, and they work to tear that person down. Another way the church makes it so hard to leave. Also, remember how I said some people think it's a business? Well, there is a case for that. Apparently, there are tiers that define how ascended each follower is, and that there is a top tier that they can reach. Thing is, they have to pay, and Leia says that in fact that there's no top tier and it's all about keeping the money flowing in. Listen, I've read some kick science fiction in my day, and sometimes I want to believe it's so hard. Like, literally any Doctor Who episode I'm in. Sweep me off into your TARDIS, alien boy. But this, well, it's up to you to decide.
Coming in at number 7, we have the Raelism. Founded in 1974, this cult believes that life was created by aliens. Yes, you heard me correctly, aliens. These aliens then assumed human form to go check in on Earth and see how things are going. These aliens are said to be people like Jesus or the Buddha. So this cult spends their days worshiping space aliens. The scariest part, in 2000, they claimed that they founded a cloning company and that they managed to successfully clone a human. Literally, everyone went nuts, and the White House even got involved in this, even though they never had any proof of the cloning. Unless the White House was like, okay, we'll pay you guys, just give us this device so we can clone people, but it stays between us. Dude, imagine? Okay, like, that's freaky. Come in our 6th spot, we have Matamoros Cult, aka the Human Sacrifice Cult. In 1989, a man named Mark Milroy went missing when out on spring break. Turns out he was kidnapped and then lost his life to this cult. This cult was known to kidnap people and take their lives as a sacrifice. The leader of this cult, Adolfo Constanzo, told his members that by doing so, they would become invincible. Why would they need to become invincible? Well, they were not only a cult, but they were also drug dealers as well. But Constanzo promised that they would never be caught by the police so long they continued to harm and sacrifice others. In the end, Constanzo was caught and then was killed in jail. But
So, but
rumor has it
you
that
look at the
cult is
camera and
still
not
around
talking
to this
to
day.
me,
Starting
but
off this list,
you
in our number
muted
10
so
spot, we have the
much.
Agape Lodge.
Uh-huh.
I've spoken about Jack Parsons before, but I had absolutely no idea that the American rocket scientist was also involved in occult practices. In the early 1940s, Parsons founded a cult-like group called the Agape Lodge, which was affiliated with Aleister Crowley's religious movement, Thelema. The lodge was based in Pasadena, California, and practiced a form of ceremonial magic that aimed to invoke spiritual entities and to achieve personal transformation. Apparently, these entities included them trying to raise the Antichrist. In 1945, L. Ron Hubbard, who would later go on to found the Church of Scientology, joined the Agape Lodge and became closely involved with Parsons. The two men engaged in a series of magical rituals and experiments, including an attempt to create a
Magic.
homunculus, sorry if I said that wrong, a miniature human-like creature through alchemy. The relationship became strained when Hubbard convinced Parsons to invest a
Also not
large
this
sum of
crazy
money
shit.
into a business venture, which he then used to leave the country with Parsons' wife. I mean, fair enough. I think that would strain any
Well, she
relationship.
accidentally,
Even the
honey,
demons were
who's
like,
that
damn,
person
that was
talking to? Not
absolutely
the
savage.
video.
The Agape Lodge
Like, why do
disbanded
you
shortly
say
thereafter,
small
of course, but the
things
influence of
instead of
Parsons and his
stupid things?
esoteric practices continue to be felt in the world of occultism and popular culture. In our number 9 spot today, we have Ophite cultist Sathanas, also known as Our
What the
Lady
fuck is
of
that?
Ender Coven. This was a small satanic group founded by Herbert
Sound like
Arthur
a music
Sloan in
note.
the 1940s.
Savannah,
The group was based in
Savannah,
Los Angeles and
Savannah.
practiced a form of Luciferianism, which emphasized the worship of Satan as a liberating force. The name Ophite refers
know
to
what
the
I'm thinking
ancient
about?
Gnostic sect known as the Ophites, who
I
worshipped
think
a
as
serpent
just
or
a
dragon as
title
a symbol of divine
itself,
wisdom. The group's beliefs were heavily influenced by
not
the
a
writings of
name.
Aleister Crowley, as well
That's
as the
just a
teachings of the
title.
Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, which we spoke about last
That's
time,
just
and
one
other
devil,
occult
and there's
groups as
probably
well. The
seven
Ophite
other
cultist
devils.
Sathanas was
Not
known for its
one
use of
devil.
ritual magic and its
Not just
promotion of
people.
sexual liberation and exploration. The group's rituals involved the invocation of demonic entities and the use of symbols, music, and dance. While the group was
I
relatively
wonder,
small and
does Demon
short-lived,
look
it had
at
a
cult
significant
people like
impact
this
on the
shit?
development
And
of
see, like,
modern
God damn, you
satanic
guys are
and occult
stupid as
movements,
hell.
and its influence can still be felt in
Like,
these
you guys
circles
so
today.
dumb
In
at
our
this
number 8
moment.
spot today, we have Michelle
I'm kind of curious.
Remembers. You
What
might
do
remember
Demon
this one.
thinks
Michelle
about
Remembers is a
cultism?
controversial book that
Like,
was written by
this
Michelle
so
Smith
stupid
and
as
her
shit.
psychiatrist Lawrence
Like,
Pastor, which was
we like the
published in
sacrifice you guys
1980.
do,
The book details
but
Smith's
you guys
alleged
are stupid
recovery
as
of
shit.
repressed memories of ritual harm at the hands of a satanic cult. According to the book, Smith claimed to have been harmed by members of the cult who allegedly engaged in a range of horrific acts, including killings, consuming flesh, and the use of demonic entities. The book's claims sparked widespread public concern and fear about the existence of satanic cults in the United States. The book's veracity has been heavily criticized and debunked by numerous experts and scholars who argue that Smith's memories were likely the result of suggestive therapy techniques employed by Pastor rather than actual experiences of these things. This criticism is also only fueled by the fact that Michelle and her psychiatrist Lawrence went on to divorce their respective spouses, marry each other, and then went on speaking tours. At the end of the day, however, I wasn't there, so who am I to say what happened for sure? Despite the controversy surrounding Michelle Remembers, the book has had a significant
You were not
impact on
even
popular
born
culture
there.
and the public's perception of satanic cults. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Illuminati. You probably have heard of the Illuminati before, but did you know where
The
it
most
really
famous
all
thing in the
started?
world.
The Illuminati is a secret society that is believed to have originated in Bavaria, Germany in the 18th century, and they have been accused of engaging in satanic practices.
That's
It's said to
probably
have
the
been
only
founded by
cult
Adam Weishaupt,
in
a
the whole
professor
world
of
who's
law
in
at the
mystery
University of Ingolstadt.
stage.
The goals of the Illuminati are often shrouded in mystery and conspiracy theories, but they are said to have aimed to promote rationalism and free thought, as well as to oppose the influence of the Catholic Church. Of course, things change over time, and that includes the beliefs surrounding this mysterious organization. In today's day and age, for those who claim the group still exists, the Illuminati has become the subject of numerous conspiracy theories that suggest they are involved in controlling world events and governments while still maintaining that satanic image. Despite the controversy and secrecy surrounding the Illuminati, its influence and impact on history remains a subject of interest and speculation for many people. In our number 6 spot today, we have the Ninth Circle. The Ninth Circle is a controversial and secretive group that is alleged to engage in satanic rituals that involve some pretty dark and horrifying things, including things like deadly sacrifices and flesh consuming. The group is said to operate globally with members from various countries around the world. I'll be honest, while the rumors and stories are aplenty, no one is absolutely certain that the group really exists. Is it fictional, or is it the world's most horrifying but best kept secret? Despite the controversy, the cult has gained a significant following among those who believe in its existence and the supposed atrocities it commits. The Ninth Circle cult remains a subject of controversy and speculation, with some viewing it as a legitimate threat to public safety, while others see it as just a baseless conspiracy theory. In our number 5 spot today, we have the Decadent Movement. The Decadent Movement was less of a cult and was more of a cultural and artistic movement that emerged in Europe in the late 19th century. It was characterized by a rejection of conventional morality and a celebration of excess, luxury, and, well, decadence. Decadent artists and writers sought to break free from the restrictions of traditional values and explore more taboo subjects such as sex, death, and the occult. They were known to celebrate Satan more in an artistic way rather than a religious way. The movement was influenced by a variety of factors, including the decline of aristocratic society, the rise of industrialization, and the growing influence of scientific rationalism. Decadent artists often depicted a world of boredom, decay, and degeneration, and their works were characterized by ornate and stylized language, vivid imagery, and a preoccupation with the senses. Some of the most famous figures associated with the Decadent movement include writers like Oscar Wilde and Charles Baudelaire, the latter being the person who wrote The Flowers of Evil and Litanies to Satan. In our number 4 spot today, we have the Brotherhood of the Golden Arrow. The Brotherhood of the Golden Arrow was a mystical and occult society founded by Maria de Neglauska in Paris in the early 20th century. Neglauska was a Russian occultist and author who claimed to have received divine revelations and messages from a group of advanced beings called the Unknown Superiors. The Brotherhood was based on the principles of the third term of the Trinity, which proposed a union of the masculine and feminine principles through the agency of a third neutral principle, and they also worshipped Lucifer, the serpent. The group practiced a form of sexual mysticism that they believed would lead to the attainment of higher consciousness and spiritual enlightenment. Members of the Brotherhood were known as initiates and participated in rituals that involved the use of symbols, music, dance, and sexual practices. The group was highly secretive and attracted a small but devoted following of intellectuals, artists, and writers. In our number 3 spot today.
Hold on. What demon have I can't spell shit. Yeah. No. Oh. Ah. Just says serpent demon. Betments, abutments, or mantos. Mantos, something species, a demon name or nickname. Because that's all I see. While the owl demon is known to ride a wolf-like being. What? Oh no, that's a wolf demon called. That's a wolf demon. I want a damn snake. No. No. Oh. Appa. Appa. I think what's that called? APET. Wow, server. I didn't know they have a wolf demon. Oh my goodness. You have a species of demons in here. So there's a good reason. I'm looking at, I cannot give you the bird right now, Dragon. I'm gonna give you one my grandmother's not looking. You bastard.
Today we have Procter and Gamble. Okay, not a cult, but a huge company. There has long been urban legends surrounding this company that suggest it is related to Satanism. I will say these are just rumors and conspiracies, and many people have done the work to try and debunk them, but when I came across this wild theory, I just had to share it with you. The idea that the former CEO of Procter and Gamble, John Smale, was involved in Satanism is a well-known conspiracy theory that has been circulating for decades, and the theory is based on the company's logo, which allegedly includes a depiction of Satan or the devil. People claim that John went on national television and shared how happy he was that the United States was so open-minded because now he could admit that the company had donated large sums of their profits to satanic cults. While no one has been able to produce a tape of him saying this, I just think this absolutely wild rumor was one worth sharing. I mean, who really knows? The conspiracy theory about Smale's supposed involvement in Satanism is believed to have originated from a rival company, Amway, which spread false rumors about Procter & Gamble in an attempt to damage its reputation. Despite being debunked numerous times, the rumor has persisted and continues to be spread by conspiracy theorists and anti-occult groups. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Process Church of the Final Judgment. This church was a religious cult that emerged in the 1960s and 1970s. The group was founded in the United Kingdom by Mary Ann McLean and Robert de Grimston, and it combined elements of Christianity, Satanism, and the occult. The group believed in a dualistic worldview in which Satan and Christ were seen as complementary forces. The Process Church also had a strong focus on apocalyptic themes and believed that the end of the world was imminent. The group's rituals were often performed in black robes and involved chanting, dancing, and other forms of ecstatic practices. Despite its controversial beliefs, the group gained a following in the United States and attracted several high-profile celebrities. However, the group's controversial beliefs and practices eventually led to its decline, and it disbanded in the 1970s. Today, the legacy of the Process Church continues to fascinate and intrigue those interested in the history of religious cults. Finally, in our number 1 spot today, we have Catherine Monvosian. During the reign of Louis XIV, poison was one of those things that you really just had to worry about. It was on the rise as an easy and sneaky way to take people out and to change the course of inheritance and influence. Because of the worries surrounding possible poisonings and stories of people close to the king doing some shady stuff, investigations began. It was soon found out that the king's chief mistress, the Marquis de Montespan, was said to be quite the client of Catherine. Catherine was a Parisian salesperson who sold powders and potions that were meant to catch the attention for the king. You know, love potion stuff. And among these love potion stories were also the stories of horrifying rituals and rites in order to get these alleged powers. These stories, of course, terrified the king, and this led for him to order Catherine to be burned at the stake. And not only this, but hundreds of others were implicated as well. Some passed from the conditions they were being held under, others were executed, and some saw punishments that spared their lives, but their reputations were forever tarnished. For the chief mistress, however, well, although she was connected to this entire ordeal, she was the mother of several of the king's children, and because of this close connection to the king, she wasn't arrested or tried. Instead, though, she was retired and sent to a convent to live the rest of her life.
Next up, we have Raelism. Not to be confused with realism, this flying saucer cult operated under the belief that human existence, along with the existence of all other living things on Earth, came to be as a direct result of genetic experimentation using the DNA of extraterrestrial life forms. The founder, Claude Vorilhon, who now goes by the name of Rael, created the organization after he was allegedly abducted by aliens and had revealed to him the many secrets of life's creation along with its purpose. Not as foreboding as the rest, as this cult does not necessarily believe the world will end, but rather that it will be taken over by our alien creators themselves in an attempt to end the world as we know it, and replace all current lifestyles with a sensual and hedonistic one that by no means follows the norms of accepted behavior within our current society. The cult, whose headquarters are located in India, boasts an impressive 85,000 members, but that's not all. The cult also claims to have successfully cloned a baby, which, with all the advances in science to date, is not necessarily unbelievable, but if it's true, impressive nonetheless. Next on the list, we have Falun Gong, a cult which appeared in China in the early 1990s and has actually since been outlawed by the Chinese government. The cult found its basis in the idea that one day the world would end in tragedy, and that in order to achieve fulfillment, you had to follow a strict set of guidelines that ended in the sacrifice of one's own life. Enticing people into the organization through the use of widespread superstitious fallacies and the promise of a better life for its members, the cult spared no expense or life in its quest to convince the public of its legitimacy, with going so far as to stage numerous extreme tragedies that completely violated not only Chinese law, but the Global Human Rights Act. The Falun Gong Way also dictates that no man, woman, or child should receive scientific or medical assistance in the case of illness. And as a result, over 1,500 Falun Gong followers have died simply from refusing to receive medical attention. With this, alongside stage tragedies and the unaliving on both a personal and social level, who knows how many followers and innocent bystanders have fallen victim to the vicious cult to date. With the cult never specifying when the world will end, we can't help but wonder if 2024 will be the year. The Falun Gong organization was officially deemed illegal on July 22nd of 1999, and all practices were therefore banned in accordance with Chinese law. Up next is James Wesley Rawls and the Survivalists, an individualized cult movement that preaches preparation and warns of the inevitable coming of the end. Rawls, the American author, former Army intelligence officer, and survival retreat consultant, has garnered himself quite the cult following after the release of his novel, How to Survive the End of the World as We Know It, in 2022. Rawls has since released 8 additional novels following along the survivalist subject line. The self-declared prepper believes the world will come to an end due to power grid failure, which honestly is a really scary take. No aliens, no cataclysmic weather events, simply just the removal of access to power being enough to topple societies, countries, and continents as a whole within days, months, and years, coming to the inevitable dismantlement of human rule. Let's face it, how many of us could realistically survive without technology?
So there's a cult for technology now. Great. Mommy never gave my phone to no one.
Technology for more than a few days, let alone months. I'm talking about heat, running water, refrigeration, GPS, so much more than just communication and entertainment. The economy would fall and chaos would ensue. Rawls, who is believed to reside in a secret bunker located somewhere in San Jose, California, says that any prepper worth his salt is already set up with self-sufficient, off-the-grid accommodations, including firewood or coal, years' worth of food stores, gardens, livestock, and weaponry, and if they're smart, an advanced medical training certificate too. Next up, we have a religion-based doomsday cult making international
What the
headlines.
hell?
This comes after leader Paul Mackenzie and 30 of his followers were brought to court in the coastal town of Malindi in Kenya on charges of being directly responsible for the deaths of 429 members of their church. Good News International Church. Out of the 429, an estimated 200 were some of the most vulnerable members of society, if you can infer what I mean by that. The bodies were found in dozens of shallow graves across 800 acres of ranch
Whoa.
belonging to the church located along the coast. The graves were found after 15 rescued and former members of the church alerted authorities on what exactly had been going on. 4 of the 15 later died in hospital due to malnutrition and starvation. Autopsies done on the mass graves show that many of the deaths had been due to starvation, forced restriction of the airways, and suffocation. Mackenzie had garnered his following by convincing religious members of his sham establishment that the world was coming to an end, and in order to achieve salvation, they must confine themselves to the parameters of his village, cease interactions with others, including other members of the church, and destroy any vital documents, including any identification, certificates of titles to property, certificates of academics, or marriage. Recent reports have stated that the charges placed against Mackenzie recognize his actions as those of unforgivable terror. Up next, we have the Order of the Solar Temple, founded in Geneva in 1984. This religious cult was created as a revival for the Knights Templar, a religious military order founded in the 12th century and later dismantled in 1312. In 1985, Bernard Raymond Faber Palaprat, claiming to be the former head of the Knights of Templar, attempted to recreate the organization but was unsuccessful, as his group split into so many separate fractions following separate belief systems. Luc Joret, a proud member of one of the fractions, later went on to develop his very own religious organization by the name of the Order of the Solar Temple, with a belief system strongly rooted in the idea of the world's imminent destruction. More specifically, Joret believed a worldwide catastrophe would take place in the mid-1990s. In preparation for the event, members were invited to participate in a ceremony deemed necessary for ascension to a higher spiritual plane. The ceremony, which consisted of the voluntary and involuntary deaths of 53 members of the Solar Temple across Canada and Switzerland, ended in flames as the buildings in which the ceremonies took place in were set on fire upon completion of the ritual by members who remained in the building after the fires were started. A year later, 16 more followers met the same fate, along with 5 more 2 years after that. Dark stuff. And finally, we have yet another space cult existing under the guise of religious extraterrestrial worship. UFO religion, as it's often been referred to, originated in Taiwan in 1993 after being founded by Chen Hongmin, a former professor of sociology at the Qian'an College of Pharmacology and Science. The religion, which has been described as an offbeat mix of Buddhism, Christianity, New Age religion, and select Western cult beliefs in extraterrestrial input with regards to human affairs, bases itself in spiritual energy and the recognition of evil. Founder Hong Min was convinced that the end of days would come in March of 1998 and moved his many followers across the world to Garland, Texas. Why? Well, he thought Garland sounded like God's land. He then prophesied that God would appear to his disciples in the form of Hong Min on
They
TV,
held that wrong.
specifically
God's
Channel
land or
18,
Golf
to
land?
formally announce his second coming.
So they
And
go
when that
there
day
for
came,
golfing?
followers would be granted access to the spaceships in the sky that had lingered just above them for years, disguised
You
as
know, it sucked.
clouds.
It would be
However,
more funny.
when the
if
day
all
came,
both
nothing
were-
happened, and so
They
Hongmin
can laugh
revised
at
his
you.
prophecy,
Yeah.
claiming that he had simply gotten the
Well,
date
beyond
wrong.
that-
He relocated his cult to New York. However, many of his disciples, disenchanted, opted to return home to Taiwan or apply for legal immigrant status in the United States and start new lives. If he did get the date wrong, though, who's to say that a peer review of his calculations wouldn't schedule the end of days for 2024?
Coming in at number 8, the Grand Orange Lodge. Now, not all secret societies are evil. A lot of them were just made as safe havens for people from different classes, religions, or
like
creeds to get
Panoramic
together
Clown
and discuss their
old
thoughts
things.
without being prosecuted by the outside world.
that
The Grand
hair.
Orange Lodge was made up by Protestants in Ireland for Protestants in Ireland. They could all congregate and not worry about being chased down for having a slightly different Christian view. Now, the reason that this is on a list of scary things is because eventually they were found out. A local newspaper was actually a supporter of their gatherings, and the head of the newspaper, as well as many members of the club, were secretly arrested. This also led to the outlawing of secret societies in Scotland. In the end, the lesson here is that the man will try to come down on you no matter how peaceful you are. Coming in at number 7 is the Quill and Dagger Society. Universities are hot spots for secret societies. It's a perfect trap. You have young, budding minds who just want to fit in. You give them the opportunity to be part of something, but only if they join your weird secret cult. The Quill and Dagger was relatively unknown for quite some time, but then they changed that when they took a very strange turn for something that's supposed to be a secret. They started started to publish the names of all their members in a book and even have social media accounts for the club. The worst thing attached to their history was an incident in the 90s when they were accused of finding members petitioning for minority rights and removing them from the club. Coming in at number 6, we have the Freemasons. This secret society goes all the way back to the Middle Ages. They were originally a group of craftsmen who needed a way to identify each other and made a mark to determine a certain level of craftsmanship. But that's not where the story gets interesting. Where it really kicks off is when the secret society works its way into America. It has been there ever since the country was founded. 13 of the 39 people who signed the Constitution were all members of the Freemasons. Now, there hasn't been anything dastardly that can be directly connected to them unless you go into the world of conspiracy theories. Then you can call up the legend of Winston Churchill, who was a member of the Freemasons. People say that he sacrificed men during World War II and did it under order of the Freemasons to increase the tragedy of the war so more eyes would be on the war. But this is just a myth and has never been proven. But the fact that so many important people from history have been a part of this group will make you raise an eyebrow. Coming in at number 5, we have the Skull and Bones Society. Rooted in American history and connected to Yale, one of the great Ivy League schools in the United States, this society has a dark history that has worked its way into the highest levels of government. Both George Bush Sr. and George Bush Jr. were members of the Skull and Bones Society. So I think it's safe to say that this club is very powerful. Some people think only the best, brightest, and richest people who attend this Ivy League school are able to walk through the doors of this secret cult. Some of the darker things that have been directly linked to the group of men who have allegiance to this place are the creation of the atom bomb and the assassination of JFK. Knowing that they've pushed several of their members into presidential power, I wouldn't be surprised if they had the power to also kill a president. Coming in at number 4 is the Hashashin. Let's go back through time to what was basically a super cool league of assassins. The Hashashin was a group of skilled Islamic mercenaries who would carry out hits on high-level targets. And we are not messing around when I say high level. This was back in the 11th century, so they were taking out kings, queens, generals of armies, and religious figureheads. They were able to operate in the shadows, and by doing so, they could sneak into a place, take out a target without causing a massive war. After the person was dead, however, it might have stirred up something a little violent. Unfortunately, a lot of the information on this ancient society was lost because one of the great libraries containing knowledge on their work was burned to the ground. They used to do that a lot back then. So most of the information is lost forever. And coming in at the number 1 spot, we have Anonymous.
Somewhere, but not telling us where it is. I feel like there's many things we don't know about the world. Say, oh, we burn things. Yeah, but I bet you do keep those shit somewhere. Like, you make a copy somewhere of this damn Earth planet. You're thinking like, you may be on something, maybe not. I don't know. I'm too high at all to relax.
This would be the definition of a new age secret society. The thing is, none of us know if Anonymous is real or who they are, but let's say they are real. I mean, they have done some very real things like releasing confidential files and hacking into police databases. Here's what we do know about Anonymous. They seem to be on the side of the people and are anti-establishment. Every time they hack into something, it's to help the common person against the massive machine that puts its boots on the necks of those below it. They seem to be a group of high-level hackers that have found a way to collect and release very sensitive information. They also love the V for Vendetta mask. I think it can be frightening because it seems that they have the power to access any sort of digital information. But as long as you're not a horrible person hiding secrets on some hard drive, then you should have nothing to worry about. All right, everyone, that has been our list. And as promised, I'm going to be doing some more pet shoutouts. Remember, if you want me to shout out your pet, you can hit me up on Instagram. I pick new pets every day. So if you don't get picked one day, you can message back another day. If it takes me a little while to get back to you, I'm very sorry, but a lot of these do. And without taking any longer, let's shout out some pets. First up, we have the super cute Poochie Bella, who's having a very nice nap. Then we have the cute cat Toner, who looks like he's chilling and watching TV. After that, we got Mystery, who looks like a very talented artist. Next, we have Caramel, who looks like the best cute boy of all time. And to close it out, we have this amazing guinea pig, RJ.
Coming in at number 10 is the Order of the Skull and Bones. The Order of the Skull and Bones, founded in 1832 at Yale University, is one of the most secretive student societies. Skull and Bones, with an HQ known as the Tomb, initiates 15 people a year
with fewer than 800 living members at any time. Fun fact, both George Bush and G.W. Bush were members. Now, New York's Observer, equipped with night vision video equipment, recorded a shocking initiation rite in which new recruits were berated with sexual insults, forced to kneel and kiss a skull at the feet of the initiators, and watch as other members acted out a throat ritual. Other reports cite ceremonies in which members dressed as the devil, a skeleton, and in robes to recite the club's death mantra: the hangman equals death, the devil equals death, death equals death. Now, the members meet every Thursday and Sunday of each week in a building they called the Tomb, and according to Judy Schiff, chief archivist at the Yale University Library, the names of the members were not kept secret until the 1970s, but the rituals always have been. Now, a number of other members have gone on to great fame and fortune, and the society is surrounded by conspiracy theories. Now, the most popular belief is probably the idea that the CIA was built on members from the group. Now, the CIA released a statement in 2007 coinciding with the popularity of the film The Good Shepherd, in which it denied that the group was an incubator for the CIA, but I'm not too sure. Number 9. The Leopard Society. Members of this animalistic group known as the Leopard Society were allegedly responsible for a series of brutal deaths in West and Central Africa in the 19th and 20th centuries. In the 20s and 40s specifically, the society was blamed for a rash of deaths in eastern Congo, resulting in several suspected members being executed by colonial authorities. Then in the 40s, more than 200 deaths were attributed to the cult in Nigeria, leading to the execution of 77 suspects. Now, little is known about the Leopard Society, and it's often difficult to separate factual accounts of its activities from misconceptions born of racism and colonial fears. Now, dressed in leopard skins and armed with metal claws, the group supposedly attacked, mutilated, and ate their victims out of belief that consuming human flesh and blood would embed their bodies with supernatural strength. Number 8. The Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. The Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn was devoted to practicing the occult, metaphysics, and paranormal activities during the 19th and 20th centuries. It borrowed from occult traditions like tarot, astrology, and Enochian magic to create magic systems still in use today. The society was based on hierarchy and initiation similar to the Masonic lodges. The first order involved learning historic philosophy and improving personal development through the study of astrology, tarot divination, and geomancy, one of the 7 forbidden arts, and Renaissance magic. The second order taught magic, including astral travel, and the third order involves secret chiefs who direct the lower 2 orders by spirit communication. Number 7. The Molly Maguires. Ireland has a long list of secret societies, but the Molly Maguires originally emerged in Ireland in the 1840s, where they lashed out at landowners who treated their tenants unfairly. The group members were known for hiding their identities by wearing women's clothing and smudging their faces with burnt cork. Now, decades later, an American offshoot in Pennsylvania was composed mostly of Irish Catholic miners who were exploited by mining companies, partly to protest awful working conditions and predatory employment practices, and partly to resist being drafted into the Union Army during the Civil War. The American Mollies allegedly struck out at their employers, assassinating 24 foremen and supervisors throughout the 1860s and 70s. But it was their labor organizing activity that ultimately proved their downfall. When their efforts threatened the profits of the Reading Railroad, the company's president sent a detective to infiltrate the group. After a 2.5-year investigation, that same railroad president served as chief prosecutor in a series of trials that sent 20 men to the gallows. According to historian Kevin Kenny, the trials were outrageously unfair. Most of the prosecutors were railroad or mining company employees. There were no Irish Catholics on the jury, and evidence presented by the detective was suspect at best. But eventually, John J. Coe, the alleged king of the Mollies, finally received a full pardon from Pennsylvania's governor 101 years after he was hanged in December 1878. Number 6. Golden Dawn. The Order of the Golden Dawn was created by Dr. William Robert Woodman, William Wynne Westcott, and Samuel Liddon McGregor Mathers. The belief system of the Golden Dawn is largely taken from Christian mysticism, the religion of ancient Egypt, Freemasonry, alchemy, magic, and Renaissance writings, to name a few. William Yeats and Aleister Crowley are 2 of the more famous members of the group. Now, the fundamental documents of the order are known as the cipher document. These are translated into English using a cipher attributed to Johannes Trithomius. The documents are a series of 60 folios containing magic rituals. The basic structure of many of these rituals seem to originate with Rosicrucianism, and there is a great deal of controversy surrounding the origins of these documents, so just keep that in mind. Number 5. The Bilderberg Group. This group is slightly different from the others as it does not have an official membership. It is the name given to a group of highly influential people who meet every year in secrecy with usually strong military and government-sponsored security. Now, the topics discussed are kept secret, so who knows what they're talking about. Now, the structure of these meetings is that of a conference usually held in a 5-star hotel around the world. Attendance at the meeting is strictly by invitation only, and the first meeting took place in 1954 at the Hotel Bilderberg in the Netherlands. Now, the original meeting was initiated by several people: Polish emir and political advisor Joseph Rettinger, concerned about the growth of anti-American in Western Europe, proposed an international conference at which leaders from European countries and the United States would be brought together with the aim of promoting understanding between the cultures of the United States of America and Western Europe. Although the agenda and list of participants are only available to the public, it's not clear that such details are disclosed by the group itself. Also, the contents of the meeting are kept secret, and attendees pledge not to divulge what was discussed. The group's stated justification for its secrecy is that it enables people to speak freely without the need to carefully consider how every word might be interpreted by the mass media. Needless to say, this group is constantly surrounded by controversy and conspiracy theories, and I so badly want to know what they discuss. Number 4, the Independent Order of Odd Fellows. The term Odd Fellows actually refers to an international organization of societies with origins dating back to the 1700s era London. The Independent Order of Odd Fellows, evolving from the former, still exists today, and even gained some headlines back in 2001 thanks to its arcane initiation practices. The Los Angeles Times reported that a maintenance person who was working at an Odd Fellows lodge uncovered real human remains hidden behind a wall. It was seized by police as evidence. Was this from a ritual? Did someone say something they shouldn't have? I don't know, and I don't think I want to be the one to find out. Number 3, the Order of 9 Angels. Established in the 60s, but getting its public recognition in the 90s, the Order of the 9 Angels claimed to be the followers of Satanism and came to the attention of the world thanks to their anti-Semitic ideologies and activism. They believe in human sacrifice to eliminate weakness and basically claim to want to conquer common people. The members see it as a very individual pursuit of excellence by studying what Satan has to offer. According to a recent survey, this group has more female supporters than either the Church of Satan or the Temple of Set, more women with children, more older supporters, and more supporters who come from a better socioeconomic background. So, I mean, hey, at least they're diverse. Number 2, the Hellfire Club. The Hellfire in Dublin was built as a hunting lodge where Dublin elites used to gather in the 1700s.
The most famous
The
location
ruins of the
ever.
club are located on the top of Montpelier Hill, overlooking the adjacent Massey Woods. Now, the secrecy surrounding the club led to speculation that its members were Satanists and devil worshippers. Now, the president was named the King of Hell and dressed like Satan with horns, wings, and hooves. Members were also said to set a place at each meeting for the devil and hope that he'd attend. There have been numerous stories about black masses, animals, and even human sacrifice rituals happening in the Hellfire Club, but that's not all. The best known Hellfire Club story is one in which the devil himself appears. According to legend, a stranger joined the club members at a game of cards. Then when one of the players dropped a card on the floor, he bent down to retrieve it and saw that the stranger had cloven hooves instead of feet. Now, another popular tale concerns a young farmer who was curious to find out what went on at the club's secretive meetings. Climbing up on Montpelier Hill, he was invited in by members and allowed to witness the night's activities. The young man was found the next morning trembling and terrified. Now, tradition says he spent the rest of his life unable to speak, unable to even remember his name. Coming in at number 10 is the Duk Duk. The Duk Duk is the secret society of the Tole people in Papua New Guinea. This ancient secret sect has played an important social role for centuries and continues to operate today, although with a very different focus. Members of the Duk Duk played the role of judge, jury, and executioner, though it is
What the
believed
fuck
that
is
they were
Duk Duk?
possessed by spirits while performing these tasks. Now, during the colonial period, efforts were made to stamp out the Duk Duk. Although this secret society still exists today, it no longer carries out its former or function and serves mainly as a tourist attraction. Now, one of the most notable features of the Duck Duck is the two types of ceremonial costumes worn by its members, both of which consist of a cone head and a leafy body. Now, in order to administer justice, members of the Duck Duck would begin by dancing in their costumes. They believed that by doing so, they would be possessed by the spirits of their ancestors. After the dance, shamans would confirm that the dancers were indeed possessed, and the secret society would travel across the island to execute the sentences proclaimed by the chiefs. Now, these sentences sometimes involved the death of the wrongdoer. Nevertheless, as the executioner was in theory possessed, he was not responsible for his actions and need not feel guilty for ending the life of another person. Number 8, the Bald Knobbers. This secret vigilante group sprang up in response to the
happened? You
rampant
killed the
crime
one
and
person.
lawlessness that plagued southwest Missouri after the Civil War. Led by
building.
their founder, a veteran named Nat Kinney, the Bald Knobbers of the Taney Count, so called because they held secret meetings up above bare mountaintops, proceeded to take the law into their own hands. Wearing their coats backwards and sporting odd horn masks, the Bald Knobbers employed such heavy-handed tactics as whipping, beating, and even ending the lives of suspected criminals. Now, eventually, some Bald Knobbers went corrupt and began to use their membership to protect their own criminal activities. Now, the group's notoriety peaked in 1887 when they ended the lives of 2 critics and injured their families. Authorities arrested 20 members and executed 4 others. A year later, Kinney, who had already left the group before the shootings, had his life ended by an opponent of the organization. Now, although minor conflicts continued after that, the Bald Knobbers had effectively reached their end by 1889. Number 7, the Bilderberg Group. Now, this group is slightly different than others in that it doesn't have an official membership. It is the name given to a group of highly influential people who meet every year in secrecy with usually strong military and government-sponsored security. Now, the topics discussed are
that's
kept
great.
secret, so who knows what they
That's
say.
really, really great.
Attendance at the meeting is strictly by invitation only, and the first meeting took place in 1954 at the Hotel Blindenberg in the Netherlands. Now, the original meeting was initiated by several people. Polish emir and political advisor Joseph Rittinger, concerned about the growth of anti-Americanism in Western Europe, proposed an international conference at which leaders from European countries and the United States would be brought together with the aim of promoting understanding between the cultures of the United States of America and Western Europe. Also, the contents of the meeting are kept secret, and attendees pledged to not divulge in what was discussed. Now, the group's stated justification for secrecy is that it enables people to speak freely without the need to carefully consider how every word might be interpreted by the mass media. Needless to say, this group is constantly surrounded by controversy and conspiracy theories, and I, like so many others, want to know what they talk about. Number 5, Ashoka's 9 Unknown Men. Now, this is India's only recorded secret society, and some believe that this was the most powerful society in the world, especially because there were only 9 members in it. King Ashoka of the Maurya dynasty in 270 BC, who had a change of heart after his conquest of Kalinga, formed a secret society of 9 men who would hold the key to everything in this world. Members of the group who came from different walks of life were given a topic of speciality. They were given the responsibility to develop, preserve, and prevent the information they found from getting into the hands of people who were capable of misusing it. Introduced to the world by a certain Talbot Mundy, he suggests that these 9 books are not only around in the modern world, but are being constantly updated by the people who could be completely trusted. Now, the first book talks about propaganda and psychological warfare. The second one spoke about physiology and how a human can have their life ended by a simple touch. The third book deals with biotechnology and microbiology. The fourth is on alchemy and transmutation of metals. The fifth one enlightened the reader about communicating with extraterrestrials. The sixth one spoke of the concept of Vinamidika Shastra, or the art of building spaceships or UFOs. The seventh one was about cosmology and the secrets of time travel. The eighth could teach the reader how to control the speed of light and use it for our own advantage. And the final book discussed sociology. It would speak of the evolution of humans, evolution of societies, including their downfall. Now, as you can assume, it is important that these books do not fall into the wrong hands. Number 2, the Secte Rouge. According to Zora Neale Hurston, an African-American author who traveled to Haiti in the 1930s, the Secte Rouge was a secret society that practiced a ritual where they ate other humans and grave robbing. Although she had no firsthand experience with
Okay.
the society, she had
Cannib-
3 indirect encounters
cannibals.
with the
Oh,
cult.
that's
The
lovely.
first occurred in
Yeah.
1936 when Zora heard an odd beating of drums late one evening. She wanted to go out to investigate, but her housegirl warned her to stay inside, or else they'd risk the cult's wrath. The second time happened when she questioned a man burning rubber tires near her house. The man explained that the tire smoke was to deter the cult members from abducting his son. Finally, she saw military men on a secret operation to suppress an unknown group in a remote area of the island. All this, plus accounts from locals who swore of the group's existence, painted the portrait of a terrifying group that met at night in ceremony and engaged in gruesome rituals, including ambushing travelers for human sacrifices. And coming at number 1 is the Skopsi. The Skopsi of Russia is a very strange group. They castrated themselves in belief that it would lead to salvation. Founded in the mid-18th century by 2 peasants, the Skopsis believed that genitals and breasts appeared only after Adam and Eve ate the forbidden fruit. Consequently, these organs
What?
must be removed to live a perfect life. Now, shortly after the
What?
group's founding, authorities arrested the 2 leaders and exiled them to Siberia. One of the leaders
That's
managed to escape
hard.
and travel to St. Petersburg, where he titled himself the Messiah and claimed to be the reincarnation of Tsar Peter III. His preaching attracted many followers, and it also attracted renewed attention from the authorities, who arrested him repeatedly and finally locked him up in a monastery for good. His incarceration and subsequent death did nothing to dampen the sect's growth. At its height, the Skepsi were believed to number more than 100,000 people and include members of the Russian elite. Now, following the Communist Revolution, the sect's numbers drastically declined, and today it is estimated that there are just over 100 left, most located in the sect's birthplace.
We're starting off with the Thule Society. So this was a very creepy secret society that sort of spawned into the National Socialist German Workers' Party in World War II. They were an occultist and nationalist group founded in 1918 by Rudolf von Sabotendorf in Munich, Germany at the end of World War I. The group was named after the mythical northern land of Thule in Greek legend. There were all sorts in this group, from aristocrats to military personnel, and most of them went on to be early sympathizers of the National Socialist German Workers' Party. The Thule Society officially disbanded in 1925, but some of its members, including Heinrich Himmler and Rudolf Hess, went on to hold pretty prominent positions within Adolf's regime. The Thule Society was a big influence on the National Socialist German Workers' Party, especially when it came to the occult and the kind of pseudo-scientific elements of the movement. And a lot of the race theory ideology Adolf came to promote was found in the Thule Society early on as well. So, if you want to talk about disturbing secret societies who had a major impact on the course of history, this was certainly one of them.
Next up, we have the Freemasons, which, if you're from Nova Scotia or the Maritimes, you probably know like at least one. But more specifically, I want to talk today about the Freemasons of the Grand Masonic Lodge, which was created in 1717 after 4 small groups of lodges banded together. The Freemasons were a secret fraternity group of brothers who operated under rules similar to Fight Club, meaning that the first rule of the Masonic Brotherhood was that you do not talk about the Masonic Brotherhood. It was a
It's the
secret
same
society
meme.
after
You
all.
don't talk
There are
about the
3
Fight
degrees
Club.
of Masonry.
What
1,
fuck up?
entered
What?
apprentice. 2, fellow craft. And 3,
You're so
master
stupid.
mason. Meetings of the society were routine and
My
ritualistic.
brain is
And their
dead.
meeting place contained many architectural
brain
symbols
says,
such as compasses and squares for some reason. To gain entry
That'd be
into the
better.
Freemasonry, you must be at least 18 years of age and have been recommended to the society by at least 3 separate current Masons. So, how have the Freemasons changed history? Well, not only were 15 US presidents, including Franklin D. Roosevelt and Harry S. Truman, part of the Masonry, but the Mormon Church, as well as the Sicilian Mafia, came as a direct result of the organization, which was, in its
Interesting.
heyday, a tool of authoritarianism and a cover for revolutionary conspiracy.
Next on the list, we have the Ordo Templi Orientis. The Ordo Templi Orientis is a secret society that's still around today. It was founded at some point in the early 20th century. The British occultist Aleister Crowley played a major role in its development. The OTO was founded by an Austrian man named Karl Kellner, who studied mysticism and occult practices from all over the globe. Western occultism, theosophy, and elements of Eastern mysticism were all kind of combined here. The OTO became somewhat famous in the 20th century, attracting people who were into the stranger, mystical side of life. I really don't know anything about what these people were doing. Sorry if you're into this kind of thing and I'm butchering it, but it's just not my thing. Crowley went on to lead the group after Kellner's death, though, and made sure the OTO had its own rituals and teachings involving magic and mysticism. Now, the group itself didn't directly change history, maybe, but many of its members were pretty influential. A lot of them were artists or writers and thinkers who definitely left their mark on the cultural scene of the 1900s. And then Crowley, especially, was a controversial figure, but he was known for his writings on magic and philosophy. And years later, he became pretty influential, apparently, in the counterculture movements in the 60s, man.
Next up, we have the Order of Skull and Bones. If that sounds a bit dark, don't worry, because it was actually originally named the Brotherhood of Death. So, anyways, it was a secret
Why
society
they named
at
that?
Yale University, and it is also the oldest known student secret society
Have
in the United
this cult
States. It was
more
founded in
than humanity
1832,
itself.
and memberships were few and far between, offered only to an
Interesting.
elite few, including none other than 41st and 43rd presidents George H.W. Bush and George Just W. Bush. Funny enough, as many secret societies do, the Order of Skull and Bones actually often practiced Masonic-inspired rituals. Which ones? No clue. They're secret societies for a reason, right? What I do know, however, is that they met every Thursday and Sunday in a building that was affectionately referred to as the Tomb. And it wasn't just presidents in attendance. Many of today's most powerful families were members of the society as well, including the Rockefellers, Vanderbilts, the Fords, Phelps, Pillsburys, Walkers, and Whitneys. Perhaps the most interesting theory about this secret society is that its formation led to the formation of the CIA, and that the intelligence agencies were built on the members of the group. Does the CIA deny this? Yes, but they also denied waterboarding. So,
Next is the ominous sounding Black Hand. Kind of sounds like someone from Pirates of the Caribbean. I love how dramatic all these secret societies need to sound. They want to stay out of sight, but at the same time, it's like we got to call ourselves the Order of the Silver Dragon or something like that. You know, you wouldn't want to join like, welcome to Captain Peter's Lucky Lads. No, we're not going to tell you what we do. It's a secret. Just doesn't sound quite as appealing. So the Black Hand was a secret military society which formed in 1901 in Serbia. So this was a group of mostly Serbian nationalists. They're probably most well known for taking out Archduke Franz Ferdinand in 1914, which ultimately triggered the outbreak of World War I. So yeah, not much of a historical impact at all. The group aims to unite South Slavic territories, particularly those under Austro-Hungarian rule, with the Kingdom of Serbia. The death of Archduke Franz Ferdinand set off this chain reaction of events, leading to the declaration of war by Austria-Hungary against Serbia, and then, of course, a bunch of other European powers got involved. World War I.
next up, we have the Bilderberg Group. And before you go judging the name, you should know that this particular secret society is actually based in the Netherlands. While there was no official Bilderberg membership list, attendees of the society's secret meetings, as a rule of thumb, were highly influential and included many government or ex-government officials. When the group got together, their main focus was politics, the economy, and military cooperation, which was fitting considering the society was formed in 1954 during the Cold War. While many believe that the group was formed in the hopes of dismantling society and creating a new world order, it seems that the actual main concern of the Bilderberg brothers was the rise of anti-Americanism throughout Western Europe. And so the society proposed an international conference in an effort to bring together European countries and the United States so that the two may reach a better understanding of one another. Was this successful? Let me know in the comments. Next up, the Priory of Sion, which was formed in AD 1099. So it's like pretty old. In the Holy and the Holy Grail, authors describe some of the society's most illustrious members as having been none other than Isaac Newton and Leonardo da Vinci himself. The group came about in an effort to promote a new world order of peace and prosperity that would stem from a leading Holy European empire. The society was also known to have protected certain royal claimants who they believed to be the literal descendants of the Bible's Jesus, Mary Magdalene, and King David, from David and Goliath. While many people believe the group to have been a hoax, many others believe that the movement to diminish the validity of the organization was created in an attempt to protect the secrecy of the organization. In 1956, Pierre Plantard was said to have sent letters back and forth with his friends describing the organization and their hand in fabricating it.
Bohemian Grove. Now, this group is about as secretive as it gets. We really don't know what the hell these fellas get up to, but secrets in the woods aren't generally pleasant. This is a group that gathers once a year at Bohemian Grove Campground in Monterey, California. This is a very old tradition, beginning way back in 1878. Of course, the campground is completely off limits to anyone who's not involved in the festivities. Members include politicians, businessmen, Hollywood actors, powerful men. There are such prominent men in Bohemian Grove that security is incredibly tight. Military and even members of the United States Secret Service help to secure the area. As for what goes on there, I think big business decisions and talks is probably a pretty safe bet. But, could there be more going on than just bigwigs roasting marshmallows and talking business in the woods? Could there be some cultish creepiness going on here as well? Only one way to find out. Get rich or famous or both, and then hope to get invited.
And to finish us off today, take a guess. Go ahead, I'm waiting. The Illuminati. The society formed illegally on May 1st of 1776 in Upper Bavaria in Germany. Its members were wealthy, well-known, and ranged from influential intellectuals to public-speaking politicians. Unlike most societies and secret organizations at the time, the Illuminati did not subscribe to any particular religion. Rather, they strived towards a radical form of enlightenment, hence the name Illuminati. Of course, because the group failed to name a religious devotion, a widespread belief that the group was comprised of Satanists with one main goal, to overthrow organized religion, took off like wildfire. In reality, this was kind of not the case. In fact, the majority of the Illuminati members were actually something called humanists, meaning that they stood for the building of a more humane, compassionate, and democratic society ethically based on human reason, experience, and reliable knowledge. While some people believe the Bavarian Illuminati to have died out around the late 1700s, some speculate that it actually led to the formation of the Skull and Bones Club that we spoke of earlier. And further still, some believe that the secret society is operating to this day, managing the main actions of international government, hoping to one day
Server,
still
your connections suck.
one world government grounded on atheist humanist principles.
That's it? Damn, there's a lot of cultist shit in the world.
Irene Palmer was born on March 2nd, 1930 in Bridgeport, Connecticut, as we can see right here on her passport. Irene's mom was deeply religious, claiming that God spoke to her directly.
Isn't
As a
that
girl, Irene had a
spooky
series
shit?
of visions just like her mother, but her
Yo,
father never
dick
believed any of
boy.
this. He thought his wife was crazy and had her committed to a psychiatric hospital, forcing a tearful goodbye.
Isn't that spooky shit
That was the
video?
last she ever saw of her mom, but her visions continued, which created issues with her
You
father.
suck.
After each vision, Irene would be left with the same thought in her head. Mary points the way. Word of her visions eventually reached the Catholic Church, and they sent a bishop to meet
Thank
with the family
goodness
and
your
convince her
discipline is
father not to
broken.
have her committed as well. The script for the nun offers a little more insight. Scripts are not usually
You know
considered
that
canon,
God
but this is
you,
one of
but
those cases where
yeah,
it's
I have
relatively
words with
non-contradictory and even fits pretty well with the nun too, so I do want to talk about it briefly. Irene was investigated by the church to see if she had potentially been
typing
possessed, but
so
it was ultimately
slow.
decided that she was pure. The bishop suggested that she dedicate her life to the Lord, and when she did so, her visions stopped, so she planned to become a nun when she reached the proper age. And this process was sped up when Irene was sent away to live in Europe by her father.
I was different. Sending me away was easier than trying to understand who I was.
So she was born in Bridgeport, Connecticut, has psychic visions, and became connected to the Catholic Church. If you follow the Conjuring franchise, this should all sound similar to another character, the paranormal investigator slash basically superhero Lorraine Warren. So what is the deal here? What is the true relationship between these two characters? To answer that question and to hear my full analysis of Sister Irene, stick around to the end of this video. Welcome to Horror History. Yes, I have conjured up another one from the Conjuring universe. As the highest grossing horror franchise of all time, the Conjuring films have done a great job of incorporating familiar elements to keep people interested in the spin-offs. The Annabelle doll was introduced in the first movie and became the centerpiece of several films of her own, but for the Nun spin-off series, the antagonist was not the only familiar element. In April 2017, it was announced that Thaisa Farmiga had been cast to play the lead role. Thaisa is the sister of Vera Farmiga, who plays Lorraine Warren in the mainline Conjuring.
Figure out what the fuck happened, because he and my grandmother have no service on a mobile phone, so something reason. So, how ancient of service connection they have? What year is it of the ancient connection? Holy shit. It's 1980 BC. Holy shit. I didn't know back then have internet. Oh. That's some spooky shit right there. Stinking. I hate you so much. Why are you like this? Why are you like this so much? They're fun. She tapping so big paragraph into everything in boosting it has a service purpose, so I'm not just two of us. Us two. Ah, interesting. So only two of you. But no, you said two. Why you put two down? There's not ancient Moyle meals mean two means four. Or five. Focus on tapping. I'm annoying you. Ah, good explanation. Much better than that last message you typed. Damn, you suck at explanation shit.
film. So fans immediately began speculating that she could be related to Lorraine,
Like,
or
I
possibly
hate-
even a younger version of her.
I
Now, last time I said the word titular in a video, I pronounced
I
it
hate you
wrong. I said
so much.
titular, and everybody just eviscerated me in the comments. And I just wanted to defend myself because the word refers to the title of a work. So in my mind, it makes sense that it would be titular, like title. But I admit I was wrong. I think next time I'll just play it safe and say eponymous. Reason I bring this up is this Variety article claims that the younger Farmiga sister is playing the titular role in The Nun. And I think that's kind of arguable. Yes, she does play a nun, or at least she becomes a nun, but when I hear the title The Nun, I'm not thinking about her, I'm thinking about the nun demon, Valak. I don't think anyone would go to see a nun movie if Valak was not in it, but they would probably be just fine if they did one without Sister Irene. But that being said, I would prefer to see more of this character, not less. It would be fun to see her go up against another villain in a different spin-off series at some point, because her backstory is mostly left as a mystery, other than a few clues here and there. So, to begin unraveling them, let's take it back to the unexpected guest who changed the course of her life. As an adult, Sister Irene works at St. Vincent Hospital in London, England. She still plans on becoming a nun, but hasn't taken her vows yet, making her a novitiate, something that everyone likes to point out constantly.
You still haven't taken your temporary vows?
You haven't taken your vows yet.
You haven't taken your votes yet.
Now you know how I feel every time someone asks me to make a Nun 2 video. I'm literally doing it. Different cultures handle it differently, but there are basically 3 steps to becoming a nun. First, there's discernment. That's where you're considered a sister or a novitiate, but not yet a nun. Once a sister takes her temporary vows, she becomes a nun, and this kind of allows her to test the lifestyle. And if she's successful, she may make her perpetual vow, signifying lifelong commitment. In 1952, she's a natural history teacher for a group of kids who are maybe in 4th grade.
I have survived many terrifying encounters, but nothing could have ever prepared me for this. My only hope now was that the beast could not smell me. But then, the wind changed, and...
This may just be a fictional story that she's telling to these kids to entertain them, but it could be a personal story about her experiences growing up with supernatural visions. It's possible that she's already taken on an entity in her past. If she grew up alongside Lorraine Warren, then I would say it's very likely, since we know Lorraine had visions from a young age as well.
You know, when I was about your age, I was visiting my mom at a hospital, and I saw an angel standing next to a little boy's bed. It was just gently touching his cheek, and then it stopped.
By the way, if Irene and Lorraine grew up together, which they most likely did, given that Lorraine was born in 1927 and Irene was born in 1930, then they're most likely cousins. We know that they aren't sisters because Lorraine's mom is still around in old age, but Irene's is not. Her dedication to religion made her believe that anything could be a sign from God, such as her brushing red paint onto this girl's nose. We'll come back to that. She's visited by a representative of the Vatican, which is basically like the HQ of the Catholic Church. His name is Father Burke, and she learned that she's been assigned to assist him on an investigation of an unusual phenomenon in Birtan, Romania, due to her familiarity with the territory.
Romania.
I'd never been in that part of the world.
Perhaps she's been chosen not because she is geographically familiar, but rather because she's familiar with the territory of supernatural encounters, maybe even involving evil entities.
Wait, I
This begs
know
the
this
question, why would they choose her over Lorraine? After all, this was the same year Lorraine
remember
founded
this
the
one.
New England Society for Psychic Research, at least in real life. It seems Irene was chosen because of the nature of the mission. Father Burke was to bring her to the Abbey of St. Carta to determine if the grounds were still holy.
Since it is a cloistered convent and your access will be limited.
This basically means that they're giving him a guide because the church is cut off from the outside world. Given that she's a nun in training, she would be allowed to explore the inside more than a normal civilian like Lorraine. But after arriving in Romania, things would prove more difficult than anticipated. Their first stop in Romania is to visit Maurice Theriault, commonly known as Frenchie. He's immediately flirting with her until learning that she's a prospective nun. However, she still charms him enough to convince him to take them up to the Abbey.
With all due respect, Father,
Please. Frenchie.
That was not that difficult. Don't you have anything better to do than simp? Once reaching the edge of the grounds, their horse refuses to continue, and they have to go by foot. This is just like the dog in The Conjuring, who refused to enter the house haunted by the witch Bathsheba. They learn that the locals spit on the ground whenever the topic of the Abbey is brought up, and the crosses lining the perimeter may be keeping the evil locked in. They visit the ice house to check on the body of the nun who killed herself, Sister Victoria, and she's strangely been moved into an upright position. Burke discovers a key clenched in her hands, and they decide to give her a proper burial outside. Sister Irene begins to notice a number of strange things. The blood at the site of Victoria's death is still fresh, and upon entering the abbey, she senses something behind her without looking. This appears to be the Reverend Mother, or essentially the head nun, but what they don't know is that this is actually Valak, the Defiler, an ancient demon who is responsible for the evil plaguing the abbey. Quick horror history lesson for those who haven't seen my Valak episode. This creature escaped from hell and killed off each of the nuns in the abbey. Their spirits continue to inhabit the place as ghosts, but the Reverend Mother's ghost is under Valak's control, much like how Bill Wilkins' ghost was controlled in The Conjuring 2. They're asked to come back in the morning, since the sisters take a vow of silence after sunset. I bet my neighbors wish I would take a vow of silence after sunset, but hey, it's the best time to record videos. But Sister Irene and Father Burke nearly don't make it to sunrise. Burke gets trapped in a coffin by Valak, and Irene is woken up by a breeze in the middle of her sleep. If her visions are believed to be messages sent to her by God, I don't think it's crazy to assume that this was God waking her up so that she could save her comrade, and stand a chance to defeat Valak later on. She comes upon some kind of midnight ritual in a chapel, where Valak appears to her as a shadow, but after, she realizes the ritual was all an apparition, and the demonic entity makes itself known in a bold way. The fact that Sister Irene sees Valak in its nun form in the mirror has to be symbolic of the choice that lies ahead of her. She's considering becoming a nun herself, but struggles to make the commitment to take her vows. It's almost as if Valak in the mirror represents her fears about her potential future, a theme that would come up throughout her story. She's also not the only one to encounter Valak in this way. This is another connection Sister Irene shares with Lorraine. Also, in the nearby town, they have a tradition to cover their mirrors whenever someone dies.
So the deceased doesn't see their reflection.
This is likely why Valak destroyed the mirror, so that Sister Irene can never find out that all of the nuns are already dead. After fleeing the chapel, she hears a bell ringing and instantly knows that Father Burke is in trouble. The gravesites around the perimeter contain what are known as safety coffins. The bell system was developed in 1892, with strings connecting the occupant's head, hands, and feet to a bell on the outside. This way, the cemetery watchmen would be alerted if they accidentally buried one alive. If you're wondering if this is where the phrase "saved by the bell" comes from, it's not, according to this article from Ripley's Believe It or Not. But apparently, the phrase doesn't come from school either. It comes from boxing. And as someone who shares a name with the main character from a cultural touchstone sitcom called Saved by the Bell, you would think I would know that. Anyway, Sister Irene had learned about the safety coffins earlier that day and somehow knew that the father was in trouble when she heard one ringing. As she got close, Valak chimed all of the bells in order to confuse her, and we see her close her eyes and envision which distress call is the real deal. The next day, he sends Irene away with the key acquired
the right device
whenever he gets the chance. And then I pried the key.
I saw you orgasm. Hey, I tell you
one more round.
I tell you twice.
Sister Irene finds the main sanctuary and comes across Sister Owana, who informs her that the nuns are taking prayer shifts to maintain a constant state of prayer.
Sister Victoria's death was a terrible tragedy for the convent, but we still feel her presence. She was the most devoted out of any of us.
Has anyone else noticed that we are literally getting Shyamalonged right now?
They don't know they're dead.
Personally, I am never one to complain about getting Shyamalonged or Weezered or Rickrolled or even Josh Hutcherson whistle edited. They also discuss an imposter nun, which Sister Owana describes as something unholy, perhaps the evil re-emerging after being sealed for so many years. Another sister, Sister Abigail, instructs Sister Owana to resume her prayers and tells Irene that she should not be here since she's not taken her vows yet. We fucking get it. However, she's told that she has to stay the night because the gates have once again closed until morning. My theory about the mirrors being connected to Irene's fear of becoming a nun is supported here, because the room that she stays in contains a mirror, and she receives another vision in her dream, where Mary points the way, echoes through her head, and she envisions Valak, the suicide of Sister Victoria, and a girl covered in blood. When she awakens, a door opens, and she's beckoned to explore by a spectral voice, leading to the discovery of an underground passage marked by the words Finite hic Deo, Latin for God ends here. It opens to reveal the bane of all things holy, Valak. She finds herself suddenly in a windstorm as she tries to escape, but the evil nun just grins menacingly at her. It comes to a halt as she's slammed into the door, but then this happens. What little light there is in the corridor is smothered away, and she's pulled into a hiding spot by Sister Owana. When the threat passes, she's instructed to get her things and meet in the chapel so they can pray their way through the night. But after arriving there, Sister Irene makes a gruesome discovery. In the main sanctuary, Irene finds a nun praying fervently next to a body under a sheet, which turns out to be Sister Oana. A whole flock of nuns storms in. I'm pretty sure I established in a previous video at some point that a group of nuns traveling together like this should be referred to as a flock, and I'm sticking with it. They lock the place up, and Sister Ruth urges Irene to pray with them.
And whatever happens, whatever you may see or hear, keep your eyes forward and don't stop praying.
Sister Irene hyperventilates, but complies. Suddenly, a blast air yeets all of the other nuns away from her, and she does exactly what Sister Ruth told her not to do. She diverts her eyes, and her prayer is interrupted. This whole scene is another test of her commitment to religion on her journey to becoming a nun. By looking away, she's distracted by outside elements, but then she refocuses her attention and continues her prayer. Her garb is then ripped open from behind, but this is not Frenchie choosing an inopportune time to make his move. It is instead an invisible force that scratches a pentagram into her back. This is another test of her dedication. She must tune out the pain and continue her prayer. It's like when you're trying to get work done, but then you see the notification that CZ's World just uploaded, and you have to resist the temptation to watch the video. Except in that scenario, the correct answer is to watch the video, or at least put it on in the background. But my point is that her restraint was being tested. She only stops when she hears Father Burke and Frenchie trying to get in, and one of the other nuns gives her a nod of approval. After letting them in, she lets them know that they've all been praying to hold back the evil. But when she turns back, all of the others are gone. And this is what makes her realize that the nuns that she's been seeing up until this point were just part of her visions, or rather, spirits of the deceased nuns that once inhabited the abbey. In other words, there was nobody left when they arrived. The place is filled with ghosts, and apparently reanimated corpses. He instructs her to get some holy water from his bag and throw it on the evil nun. And I love in all these movies whenever they try to make these priests like these badass action heroes, and they just have their satchels packed with holy water so they can whip it out like a gun. And it works. It works every time. He douses a cross in holy water and uses it to drive the demonic force out of the nun's body, which goes up in flames when the entity can no longer endure the divinity bearing down on it. Frenchie is about ready to GTFO, but Sister Irene bravely insists that they cannot leave without first sealing the gateway to contain the evil. She's come a long way. At first, she had no idea what her purpose was on this mission, but now she's the one leading the charge into the underground passages to search for the blood of Christ that will supposedly send the Crooked-Nosed Conventual back to where it came from. And having found her purpose, she's ready to make a commitment that she wasn't sure about before.
I'd like to take my vows.
She does this because she's discovered that her visions are a miracle of God. Either that or she's just sick of everybody asking her about it. It's kind of an L for Frenchie, that.
That, sister, is a noble act. It's a shame, but...
Oh, Frenchie, you'll find someone. Briefly, then you'll die. Imagine if you were crushing on a girl and then she became a nun and swore herself to celibacy. That's kind of like, I don't know, I think I'd be kind of salty. Father Burke helps her make what I believe are her temporary vows, and she's T-posing face down on the ground, so that's kind of funny. After officially becoming a nun, she feels she's ready to face down the demon posing as a nun, no longer willing to be taunted by the form that she felt mocked by. In the corridors under the abbey, a beam of light shines down on the finger of this Virgin Mary statue, connecting to the phrase associated with her visions since childhood. Mary points the way, and further making her believe that her visions came from God. They follow the beam to a secret keyhole in the wall and unlock it using the key recovered from Sister Victoria to find the glass orb containing the blood of Christ. And Father Burke tells her that only a true bride of Christ can wield it. So I guess it's a good thing she did her vows. With the ultimate weapon in hand, they proceed past the cellar door for the first time into the area where evil reigns supreme. They split up, you know, the thing you're definitely supposed to do in a horror movie, and Irene is stalked by a faceless nun as she hears the whispers of the spirits of the nuns who had assisted her. But before she can do anything, she's chokeslammed by Valak and runs to a seemingly unused storage room for safety. Once again, there's a mirror, and for the third time now, it would be connected to Valak. She's encircled by 5 candles, which light themselves, and she realizes that she's standing in a pentagram. But as she runs for the exit, she's stopped in her tracks by an army of robed figures, who abduct her and bag her head, forcing her to join their ranks. Frenchie eventually finds her, but when he uncovers her head, she's been possessed by Valak, and she aerates him into a pillar, which he's pinned against. This is the next logical step in the mirror metaphor. Valak had used mirrors to make Irene fear her future as a nun, and now that she's realized that life by becoming one, Valak would literally possess her. It's bringing those fears to fruition. The possessed Irene hurls targeted insults about Frenchie being the village idiot. It's a trope that we've seen a lot in the exorcism genre, going back to The Exorcist. However, he's able to use the vial hanging from her neck to smear the blood of Christ on her face, calling back to the beginning of the adventure when she smeared the paint on the girl's nose. This has an immediate and powerful effect, exorcising the demon from her body. And it's honestly just nice to see an exorcism scene in this franchise that doesn't involve throwing up that black substance. She's knocked aside as Valak deviously grabs Frenchie by the throat and flashes a disgusting smile in her direction. She tries to bum rush the evil entity, but she's aerated completely out of the room into a pool of water that's forming by flooding from overhead. It's possible that this moment is supposed to represent a symbolic baptism. A baptism is a Christian practice of submerging a person in water to cleanse or purify them as an initiation to joining the religion. This is more of a symbolic baptism than a literal one. Being baptized is a requirement for being a Catholic nun, so it's likely that Sister Irene already went through the baptism ceremony when she was young. But now that she's taken her vows and joined the Sisterhood of Nuns, she's starting a new chapter in her life. On the website TV Tropes, a symbolic baptism is defined as a sign of character development where swimming or watery immersion marks a major turning point in the character's life. Most commonly, it marks the point where the character begins to let go of the past or is initiated into a new phase of their life. So this fits Sister Irene pretty well. She loses grasp of the Holy Grail, but when she goes to reach for it, she notices Valak rising up from below the surface.
Dun 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 dun. Demon shock. I had to make something fun. I can't
Valak
help
attacks and holds down Sister Irene under the water. Even Father Burke's prayers do little to slow it down. However, he does provide just enough of a distraction for Irene to bring the Grail to her mouth under the surface. With that, Valak believes that it's won and lifts her up to eye level, but realizes the contents of the glass case have been removed. And Irene outsmarts her hellish counterpart with where she's hidden the goods. For years, the people in town have spit on the ground after any mention of the evil as ancient superstition, and now Irene is using the same tactic to hopefully finish it off for good. And this has a devastating effect, as Valak appears to be sucked down into a vortex and back where it came from. Before leaving, she gives a proper blessing to the nuns of St. Carta.
I thought this ground wasn't holy anymore.
It is now.
And before leaving Romania, she sees off Frenchie at the train station and learns that he's planning on going to Hungary, then traveling the world. At some point after this, she must have gone back to the Vatican with Father Burke and met Cardinal Conroy, who was obviously impressed enough by her work to call upon her again in the future. The story of what happened in Romania kind of becomes an urban legend among the other sisters and nuns.
What happened to the nun? Well, no one really knows. They say the experience was too much for her. Some say that she went mad.
It seems like it would be difficult for gossip to spread, considering that cloistered nuns generally do not travel. However, other nuns and sisters do apparently travel a lot, primarily for missionary work, where they try to recruit people in other countries to their religion. They would not be the only ones bothering people from other countries. After lying dormant inside of Frenchie for 4 years, Valak would re-emerge in 1955 and 1956 and take 4 victims across Europe, one of which was a priest named Father Noiret, who was immolated at his church in Tarascon, France. Because of course the French priest would be named after wine. That night, Irene wakes up in the middle of the night in a manner very similar to when the breeze woke her up at St. Carta's, right down to the way that the curtains blow in the breeze. Given my earlier analysis, I would interpret this as a divine call to action. And in fact, this is another dream, a vision of Maurice possessed by Valak and asking to be saved. The next day, she's visited by Cardinal Conroy. She doesn't look thrilled to see him, which is kind of understandable considering this dude only shows up to deliver bad news.
There has been an incident.
See, I told you, he doesn't even make any small talk first. I'm the exact same way. She's given the lowdown on the 4 gruesome deaths moving west across Europe, which they suspect to be the work of the demon that she thought she had sealed away 4 years prior with the help of Father Burke. Speaking of whom,
Father Burke is dead.
see, this guy never has any good news. She doesn't want to go, but they basically strong-arm her. Luckily, her friend Sister Deborah tags along to look after her, so she's not completely solo as she begins her search at the site of the last known incident, Tarascon, France. Like the Abbey in Romania, there's a belief that this church is cursed following Valak's appearance. As she looks around the place, she's able to see visions of the past, falling ash, the burnt-up husk of Father Noiret, and the boy who inherited his rosary. They're taken to see Father Noiret's room, and they come across a picture of Saint Lucy, patron saint of the blind. Like much of the lore in the Controverse, Saint Lucy is based on a real person, a saint from Italy in the 200s who devoted herself to Christianity. There are a number of myths and stories about the cause of her blindness. Some versions say that she gouged out her own eyes when a potential lover became infatuated with them in order to prove her dedication to religion and virginity. Another take on the matter tells of how she was captured by the Roman Emperor Diocletian, and her eyes were gouged out prior to her execution. That seems to be closer to the version of the tale that appears in the Controverse.
She was murdered by
I will
pagans.
point it out.
They lit her on fire.
Is this one next to her the one that like have the back towards the camera? She's the descendant of her. Yes, that's her. Yes. She's descendant, and also there's another one.
but she wouldn't burn. Before killing her, they gouged out her eyes.
Very metal. Irene learns that Frenchie had worked at this very church as a handyman until Father Noiré was killed, and comes to the realization pretty quickly that he must have been the vessel that smuggled Valak out of the Abbey, and the reason that these tragedies are seemingly spreading across the continent. While checking in at the Hotel Tarascon, Irene's sixth sense is on high alert, and she's led out into the street where she sees the altar boy, Jacques, among a group of kids playing European football. Jacques was the one whose father was killed by Valak. In pursuit of answers, she finds herself at a newsstand where the wind blows the pages of each magazine open to the right page to collectively form the haunting image of Valak, right next to this picture of Harambe. When she gets close to it, Valak appears in a flash and grabs her throat, and in this instant, she receives a vision of a burning ritual in a forest, where a man in a red cloak stabs a nun in the face as she holds some kind of artifact. He stabs her twice, then we see a divine light coming from her eyes, leading me to believe that this is a representation of Saint Lucy, patron saint of the blind. Irene passes out in the streets, not waking up until the next morning. I'm not sure if the doctor was using a figure of speech or if Irene's survival from this incident was not guaranteed.
There she is, back from the dead.
I kind of wish we could see what happened in between. It seems like she was out for like 8 hours at least. Was the doctor just prodding her and shining lights in her eyes all night until she woke up? And then he just leaves without getting paid? Are we sure this dude is a real doctor?
What happened last night?
Nah, that's what she should be asking you. Anyway, Irene concludes that Valak is using Frenchie to get at this relic that she saw in her vision. While she was unconscious, Jacques visited Sister Deborah and dropped off his father's rosary, which is basically this necklace with a cross, which is often seen being used to fend off demons, and it also contains this symbol.
The symbol, it seems so familiar.
As his descent.
I'll give her the benefit of the doubt and just assume that she's still a little foggy since she just woke up, but it's clearly the symbol from the artifact in her vision, which doesn't seem like it was that long ago. The symbol also matches a piece of jewelry seen in the crime scene photos of the other Valak victims provided by Cardinal Bad News Conroy. They hurry to Palais du Pape, the Catholic archives, to try to learn what they can about the symbol, but they would also receive a tip that would have rippling ramifications. The librarian at the Catholic Archives is able to identify the symbol they brought in as the family crest of St. Lucy. The archivist thinks that each of the demon's victims are descendants of St. Lucy, and that Valak is hunting them down in search of the eyes, a sacred relic in Lucy's family that holds spiritual power, much like the blood of Christ. According to his records, he thinks they can find the eyes buried at the monastery of Jean-Paul Rodard, which is now a boarding school. They rush over there, hoping to arrive before the relic falls into the wrong hands, and the first person she encounters is none other than her old guide, Frenchie. But the reunion is soured by Irene's accusation that the evil is living inside of him.
Get away from them! What? We need to go. Now.
It's you. It's inside of you.
This causes the dormant unholiness to take over his body and deliver a chilling greeting.
Hello, sister.
When she tries to follow him, he right hooks her into a window, but she comes back with the rosary and demands the demon to leave his body. Sister Deborah chips in with the Bellinger bash, and they chain up the unconscious Maurice in the hallway.
He's sick. We're going to help him, but we need your help.
Sister Irene has some serious Universal Studios ride pre-show energy right here. Like how they always try to make the rider feel like they're a part of the story, and then the help that we give is literally just being along for the ride. But then when you get back to the station, everybody claps for you like you've accomplished something. They realize that Frenchie was headed toward the old haunted chapel, and the young boarding student, Sophie, fills them in on the lore, that the goat on the stained glass window is a devil whose eyes will glow red when the sun hits it at the right angle. They're able to recreate this with the flashlight and find the endpoint of the red beam, which must be pointing out where the eyes of St. Lucy are buried. If you're getting a little bit of deja vu, it's probably because this is the exact same puzzle as the one that Irene solved back at the Abbey of St. Carta to find the blood of Christ. But this time, instead of being directed by a supposedly divine figure, she's following the clues of a supposedly demonic one. Is this representative of the potential danger that lies in trying to use the eyes? A sign that this time they're playing with a weapon that they may not be able to control? Maybe. The goat demon disappears from the stained glass and appears in the girls' sleeping quarters on the other side of the school, causing mayhem for them to tend to. But they soon discover the reason this previously inanimate object has come to life. Frenchie has escaped from his chains under Valak's control, and he irrigates Sophie's mom out of the way en route to tackling Sister Irene and forcing a fumble, which is recovered and advanced by Sophie. This does draw Frenchie Valak's attention away, but Sister Irene is left in pretty bad shape. There may be some symbolism here pertaining to Irene's own relationship with her father. There's no mention of him being physically abusive towards her, but Irene says that she was sent away by him because that was easier than trying to understand her. Clearly, it's a strained relationship. Frenchie has been trying to take on a fatherly role himself lately, doing his best to serve as a role model for Sophie before Sister Irene showed up. So his attack on Sister Irene was likely received as a very personal jab, given her problems with her own father. It wouldn't be that different from when Valak temporarily possessed Sister Irene in 1952 and started hurling targeted insults about Frenchie being the village idiot. The extremely helpful archive librarian guy even hinted that the demon of St. Carta would choose a form to prey on her fears.
And the fears of those around you. You must be prepared to stop it at all costs.
That guy was such a king, by the way. He basically solved the whole mystery for them. It told them exactly where to go and what they would be up against. And his name isn't even mentioned outside of the credits. Let's give it up for Father Ridley, the true hero of this story. Anyway, Irene is only able to track down where Sophie and Frenchie Valak ran off to after seeing this tower start to crumble under the power of St. Lucy's eyes, which she uses to ward off the demon moments before retrieving the blessed artifact from Sophie. Her will is tested when Frenchie, what appears to be the real Frenchie, gets through and begs for his life. But she knows she must not hold back in order to prevent anyone else from becoming a victim. Plus, that's what Father Ridley told her, and he's basically a god among men at this point. Just when it seems he's finished, Frenchie Valak springs back to life and grabs the eyes from her, and seems to absorb them, and Valak rises up in nun form behind him, now taking on an enormous stature. She tries using the rosary, but that didn't work in 1952, so why would it work now? Valak responds by shooting this chain at Sister Deborah, and Irene is levitated into the air in a crucifixion pose and lit on fire. Valak seems to be using the power of the eyes to deal Irene the same fate that St. Lucy once suffered. But then, Irene experiences a quick flash of images, so let's break them down. First, she hears her mother's words, "I will always be with you." Then, she sees her mother looking at her, followed by 2 images of the burning St. Lucy at the hands of the pagans. Then, the picture of St. Lucy from Father Noirier's church. She also sees Valak standing in Lorraine Warren's home in 1977, and intercut with more flashes of her mom, an image of Lorraine Warren opening her eyes after seeing Valak for the first time, which also doesn't happen until 1977. Not the first example of her having future sight, but maybe the first time that she gets a glance into someone else's future. After a few more images of the attempted burning of St. Lucy, her own flame goes out and she falls to the ground. Like St. Lucy, the pagan was unable to burn her. And I'm considering Valak to represent the pagan in this instance because Valak's lore comes from a grimoire or spellbook called Ars Goetia, part of a series of demon summoning guidebooks called the Lesser Key of Solomon. So the summoning of Valak is not connected to any major religion, thus making it a pagan mythological entity. So what do all of these images mean? Well, remember back at the beginning when I suggested that Irene and Lorraine probably have some blood relation due to the actresses that portray them, Vera and Thaisa Farmiga being sisters? Well, there's another pair of characters whose actresses share common blood. St. Lucy and Irene's mom are both played by Case Colebrook, which to me suggests that these characters are supposed to be related as well. Meaning that Irene and Lorraine are both part of the bloodline of St. Lucy, which means that the images that flash through Irene's head have one thing in common. They're all blood relatives. When Irene's mom says, "I will always be with you," she's not just talking about her memory. She's referring to the supernatural power of the St. Lucy bloodline. The power that, when combined with the eyes of St. Lucy, seems to protect her from the threat of burnination. Through the fire and the flames, Sister Irene carries on. It's further suggested shortly after, when Irene recalls Father Ridley's quip about the Lucy family.
When Lucy was murdered, her family escaped. They were hunted, scattered across the globe.
Perhaps the eyes of St. Lucy are not only an artifact, but also a generational gift, allowing those in her bloodline to have psychic visions. It would certainly seem plausible, because Lorraine has the same gift, and in The Conjuring 2 and Annabelle Comes Home, it's clear that she's passed it down to her daughter, Judy Warren.
Mom, who's that?
But the battle isn't over yet. Sister Deborah joins Sister Irene in prayer, and in probably the most French thing that could have possibly happened, barrels of red wine burst open and wash Valak away, causing the infernal enemy to somehow dry up and combust into an epic inferno. Frenchie is temporarily able to regain control of his body, but the evil would continue to lie dormant inside of him. But for the time being, it seemed that Sister Irene had paid back a favor by saving his life 4 years after he had done the same for her. The two would see each other off for presumably the final time, this time with just a nod, as Frenchie moves on with his newfound family. Yeah, and that's just it. Sister Irene's story arc is not a typical final girl archetype of a girl coming out of her shell to kill the villain or overcoming her fear to escape her stalker. In true Conjuring fashion, it's more of a spiritual journey. She's been chosen by a higher power, whether that be God or Cardinal Bad News Conroy, and she's forced to demonstrate her faith by taking her vows and believing in her visions. nuns. My problem is that her entire character arc is completed in The Nun 1, and character-wise, nothing really happens with her in The Nun 2. You could say that I was none too pleased with the sequel. The extremely helpful librarian Father Ridley does more than she does in that movie. He literally does all the work for her. He solves the mystery of the Lucy family crest for her, he explains all the lore to them, then when she wants to find the eyes, he's like, I already found them, and tells her exactly where to go. It's so bizarre. Irene is basically only relevant in The Nun 2 because she was born with St. Lucy's blood. It's not something that she earned or struggled for, so it feels cheap when that ends up being what helps her overcome Valak. This is what I call a chosen one story. There are two types of chosen one stories, the good kind and the bad kind. In the good kind, the hero is destined to become the only one who can defeat the villain, but success is not guaranteed. For example, in Harry Potter, which also takes place in a European boarding school, a prophecy seems to point to Harry being the only one with the power to defeat the Dark Lord, but he still has to mature and form relationships and overcome adversity by embracing the power of love along the way. His character arc ultimately puts him in a position where he could be the victor. The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess has a protagonist referred to as the hero chosen by the gods, but that doesn't make him immune to death. He has to build trust with his companion, Midna, and learn ancient skills along the way in order to even have a chance. Sister Irene seems to just be invincible against fire because she was born that way. She didn't really earn it. She's more like Rey from the Star Wars sequel trilogy. She's essentially able to win very early on because of who she is. Again, this is more of a problem with the second Nun movie than the first. If you want to see an example of how this could have been done a little better, watch Insidious: The Last Key. In that movie, Elise Rainier is a psychic ghost and demon hunter, just like Sister Irene, who had almost the exact same problem, with her dad not believing or being afraid of her psychic abilities and treating her poorly because of it. Elise lives her life hunting some of the world's scariest demons, but none of that compares to her personal demons with her father. In the end, the antagonist, Keyface, uses her father's ghost to confront her, and she must overcome the familial issues in order to hunt down her real enemy. Valak has the ability to take on any form, which is why it chooses the nun form to mock the sisters at the Abbey of St. Carta in Nun 1. So it would have made sense for one of the alternate forms to resemble Sister Irene's personal demon in her relationship with her father in the second movie. You know, instead of this random goat from the stained glass window. If you want to see my full analysis of Keyface, by the way, that link will be in the description. But to get a proper grasp on how everything connects in the Conjuring universe, you'll want to have your pointer possess that playlist on the left. Remember to subscribe to CZ's World for new horrors every week, ring the death bell for all notifications, and I'll see you in the next one. Assuming we both survive.